Chapter 129. The light of the sun gradually disappeared, and 2 moons appeared in the sky above the forest. Some nocturnal animals gradually came out, and most of the birds flew back to their nests. There were many bird nests above the branch Xiao Xian was on, but Xiao Xian would not take the initiative to provoke those birds. These birds did not look big and looked quite pleasant, but in fact, they were very dangerous. If it was a seriously injured animal or a recently dead animal, they would swarm over and start a feast. There were birds fighting above, and a bird fell from its nest and landed on the branch Xiao Xian was standing on. Turning over and shaking its wings, the bird looked at Xiao Xian. At night, its vision was not good, but its sense of smell was very sensitive. It smelled the blood on Caesar's body, and also felt that Caesar was weak. The bird, which was about to shake its wings and fly back to its nest, changed its mind and rushed in Caesar's direction. Some fine sharp teeth could be seen in its open mouth, and the edges of its beak were serrated. With each bite, a piece of meat would be scraped off. When the bird flew over, Xiao Xian quickly took a step forward and stabbed with his right hand holding the stone knife. The bird, which was excited by the smell of blood and completely ignored Xiao Xian, suddenly felt the dark clouds of death rise in its heart. In the next moment, Xiao Xian's stone knife penetrated the bird's body. Without looking at the bird again, Xiao Xian swung his arm and threw the bird on the stone knife to the tree trunk. At the end of the branch, there was a hole in the trunk, and the hole was emitting a sparkling green light. When Xiao Xian threw the bird over, a mouth instantly opened at the entrance of the tree hole and swallowed the bird directly, then retracted back into the hole. The sparkling green light continued to flash, attracting some nocturnal insects to fly here and eat them. It was a kind of tree worm that lived in trees. During the day, it looked no different from other worms, but at night, its body would emit fluorescent light to hunt for food. There were still many birds watching from the tree. If Caesar was left here alone, he would be reduced to bones in a few minutes. These birds were just not active at night, but they would still move and eat. They would not let go of any weak animals. Xiao Xian did not sleep. In the forest at night, even if he stayed in the trees, it was only a little safer. There were still many dangers in the trees, so he had to be vigilant at all times. When Xiao Xian was looking for vines to make a stretcher, he found a few herbs and gave them to Caesar. However, the effect was not good. As time passed, Caesar's condition was still deteriorating. After all, Caesar was not a totemic warrior. If he had the recovery ability of a totemic warrior, he would be able to hold on for a while. Many totemic warriors could hold on until they were sent to the tribe. However, Caesar was just an ordinary wolf. His congenital condition determined that he could not become a stronger beast or even a ferocious beast in a short period of time. In terms of physical fitness, he was not even comparable to most of the wolves in the new wolf pack. His recovery ability was limited. Xiao Xian could not change this. Thinking of this, Xiao Xian could not help but sigh in his heart, feeling a little sad. After all, he had not been in this world for long before he started to raise Caesar. More than 2 years, thinking of this, Xiao Xian suddenly froze. Recovery? Yes, recovery. Caesar's recovery ability was not impossible to change. As long as Caesar could turn from an ordinary beast into a ferocious beast, even if he could not become a ferocious beast, as long as his overall ability was improved, he could last longer. And one way to turn Caesar from an ordinary beast into a ferocious beast in a short period of time was the secret engraving technique recorded in the ancient scroll. According to the ancient teachings, the target who used the secret engraving technique had strict requirements. As for Caesar, first, he could follow the hunting, and second, his loyalty was good. Even if he did not completely meet the requirements of the ancestors, Xiao Xian decided to give it a try. Xiao Xian was not absolutely sure about the secret engraving technique, so he had not used it on Caesar. But now, except for this, there was no other choice. If he tried, he could fail or succeed. If he failed, Caesar would not see the sun tomorrow. If he succeeded, Caesar would live. But if he did not try, Caesar would definitely die. "Hey, buddy," Xiao Xian touched Caesar's wolf head. "There is a way to save you. If it succeeds, you will become more powerful, and you may even become a ferocious beast. If it fails, you can only say goodbye to this world." Caesar opened his eyes and wanted to touch Xiao Xian's hand with his nose, but he had no strength. He could only open his eyes and look at Xiao Xian. Gusts of night wind blew, and the branches swayed. Some weak moonlight penetrated through the gaps between the leaves and shone into Caesar's eyes. The reflected light made the wolf's eyes look a little scary, like two flashing lights. In the forest, many animals' eyes at night looked like this. Xiao Xian was not afraid. He raised his hand and touched Caesar's wolf head. "Okay, as long as you agree. Hold on, buddy. Old Ku is still waiting at home. There are still a bunch of cubs in the tribe waiting for you to teach them a lesson. Without you, they may not last long and will be cooked. And the wolves that killed your tribe are still alive. Do you want to continue taking revenge?" The engraving secret technique was not only the will of the caster, but also the will of the receiver. If the receiver was willing to accept it, the success rate would be higher. If there was a conflict between the two, the possibility of failure would be higher. Even if it succeeded, the effect would not be good. The ferocious beasts created might rebel. This was also why the ancestors would rather choose fewer ferocious beasts and choose the most loyal of them. Caesar's current state was not good for the engraving secret technique, but in order to increase the possibility of success, Xiao Xian wanted to arouse his desire to live. The potential in a desperate situation was unpredictable. That was why there were sayings such as fighting back and being reborn from the ashes. After a few words with Caesar, Xiao Xian did not delay any longer. While Caesar was still awake, he started. He made a simple fence with rattan to prevent other small beasts from interfering. Xiao Xian did not know what kind of changes the engraving secret technique would cause, but here, he was willing to take the risk. Handing the stone knife to his left hand, Xiao Xian squatted down and stretched out his right hand in front of Caesar. Carefully recalling the records in the ancient scroll and his daily practice, Xiao Xian began to mobilize the power of inheritance in his body. In the sea of consciousness, at the bottom of the totem flame, near the two horns, the blue flame gradually increased, and a trace of blue separated from it. At the same time, under Xiao Xian's right palm, the trace of blue began to form the shape of two horns. It was not just a flat figure, but a three-dimensional totem shape, far smaller than the one in the tribe's fire pit. It was only the size of a walnut. The two horns gradually formed. When the engraving was completed, some blue flames began to gather around the horns. Then, above the blue flames, a red flame began to appear. During this process, Xiao Xian did not dare to be the slightest bit careless. The slightest mistake could cause the engraving to fail and the totem to scatter. When the red flame finally appeared and stabilized, Xiao Xian was slightly relieved. This proved that the engraving of the totem by the power of inheritance was successful. But this was only the beginning. After the engraving, it was time for the imprinting. After the totem was completed, Xiao Xian moved his palm and pressed it on Caesar's forehead. The totem moved with Xiao Xian's hand. When it touched Caesar's forehead, it did not immediately imprint. Xiao Xian felt resistance in his hand, but he was not worried. According to the ancient scroll, there would be a lot of resistance in the process of imprinting. After all, he was not a member of the tribe, not even a human. Naturally, there would be some resistance. Without stopping, Xiao Xian continued to slowly imprint the totem. He could not rush, but he could not be too slow either. He had to control his own speed. The ancient scroll did not explain it clearly, so Xiao Xian could only rely on his intuition. As Xiao Xian's palm pressed down, the two-horn totem was slowly imprinted on Caesar's forehead. With his palm on Caesar's forehead, Xiao Xian did not immediately withdraw his hand after completely imprinting the totem. Instead, he helped to guide the flow of totem power in Caesar's body. Caesar still had consciousness, so he began to follow Xiao Xian's guidance and began to mobilize this new power. It knew what this was. Every year at the end of winter, when the tribe held a sacrificial ceremony, it would feel this power. However, the difference was that it had avoided this power the last 2 times, but now, it felt close to it. When Caesar's consciousness began to take control, Xiao Xian withdrew his hand. Wiping the sweat from his forehead, he looked around. If there had been a beast or a ferocious beast, he would have failed. Fortunately, there was no movement for now. Looking at Caesar lying on the branch, Xiao Xian could only help here. In the secret technique of engraving, this was all he could do. The rest was up to Caesar. If he could master and accept this power, he would have succeeded. If he could not, he would not be able to hold on for long with such injuries. Soon, Xiao Xian noticed that Caesar was trembling. The more he shook, the more his whole body began to twitch. Puff! Caesar spat out blood directly onto Xiao Xian's body. Crack! 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 With the crisp sound of bones, Caesar's whole body swelled up. It was only his bones that held it up. His fur clung to his bones, making him look like a bag of bones. What happened? Xiao Xian looked at the scene in front of him in shock. The ancient scroll did not mention such a reaction. It only said that after the hounds and totems merged successfully, they would grow into beasts that were stronger than other beasts in a short period of time. The stronger ones would even become ferocious beasts. But the short period of time mentioned in the ancient scroll did not mean a few minutes or hours, but dozens of days. But now, after only a few minutes of engraving, Caesar's body began to change. Xiao Xian did not know if it was the same as what the ancestors said. There were no detailed records of this. Xiao Xian had been paying attention to Caesar's condition. The broken bones had reformed and were bigger. He did not know how the internal injuries were. The 2 wounds on his body that had lost large chunks of flesh had stopped bleeding. One of the wounds could even be seen protruding bone. Although the changes in front of him were beyond Xiao Xian's expectations and were different from what the ancestors said in the ancient scroll, Xiao Xian could feel that Caesar's vitality was getting stronger. Although the process was not as obvious as the changes on the surface, it was indeed a good sign. Above, the birds that had been watching Xiao Xian and Caesar, waiting for an opportunity to sneak attack, shrank back into their nests and hid. They no longer looked down and pretended to be quails. In the tree hole, the glowing green tree worm also crawled into the depths of the hole. Even the fluorescence on its body had dimmed. Chapter 130. It was a peaceful night. A few ferocious beasts passed by under the tree quietly. They probably smelled the blood on Caesar's body, so they glanced at the tree, but did not do anything threatening. Instead, they swaggered away. The tree worm did not come out from the tree hole. Even when some flying insects flew to the tree hole, it did not stick out its head or open its mouth. Xiao Xian guessed that it might be because of the engraving technique. Just like when the tribe held a ceremony, other animals would stay away from it. Even though the fire seed did not spread, it seemed that it was not a coincidence that no wild beasts or ferocious beasts attacked. Even so, Xiao Xian did not dare to be careless. He kept watch for the whole night. In the morning, the 2 moons gradually disappeared in the morning sun. The birds in the tree had already started to chirp cha-cha. When yang guang shone through the leaves, the birds in the nest above Xiao Xian's head had already disappeared. The wounds on Caesar's body had stopped bleeding, and the bite wounds had already scabbed over. It looked a little scary, but in fact, it was much better. Caesar, who was lying on the tree branch, was breathing steadily. He had not woken up yet. Listening to his breathing that was getting stronger, Xiao Xian was relieved for the time being. He also checked the broken bones in Caesar's body. They had all recovered, and there was not even a trace of fracture. Was this the benefit of the engraving technique? Xiao Xian waited for a while on the tree, and listened carefully. He heard the sound of a wooden whistle. It should be the hunting team. He quickly took out his wooden whistle, and blew it according to the rhythm. It sounded like the chirping of birds in the forest. Not long after, Mai came over with some people. Xian. Mai was relieved when he saw Xiao Xian standing on the tree. Mai was shocked when he saw Caesar lying there. How did he get hurt like this? Mai was stunned before he finished his words. Something was not right. This is, Mai pointed at Caesar, who was lying there. He stuttered as he spoke, his eyes filled with disbelief. This is Caesar? Lang Jie leaned forward to take a closer look. You didn't seem so big yesterday. Why do I feel like you've grown up in just one night? The few people who came with Mai also nodded repeatedly, their eyes constantly sweeping over Caesar. It was injured yesterday, so it changed a little, Xiao Xian said. This isn't just a small change, Lang Jie mumbled. However, now was not the time to dwell on this. They had to leave here quickly and return to the cave. Mai and his men did not return home for the entire night. They had spent the night outside and probably could not fall asleep. They had been vigilant the entire night and continued their search when the sun rose. They did not sleep at all. Seeing the obvious fatigue on their faces, Xiao Xian felt very apologetic. I'm sorry, Xiao Xian said. Mai waved his hand. Let's go back first. Although he really wanted to beat up Xiao Xian here, the most important thing was to go back first. The people waiting in the cave probably did not sleep at all. As Caesar was still unconscious, Xiao Xian used the stretcher from yesterday to slowly lower Caesar from the tree. The stretcher they used yesterday was just right. Today, when they placed Caesar on it, the stretcher seemed much smaller. Most of his head and tail were hanging off the edge of the stretcher. Mai and the others were below. After the stretcher was lowered, they said, he's much heavier. He's bigger and thinner, a middle-aged man next to Mai whispered. Caesar was usually well-fed. Even when he went hunting, he had never lost weight. He was not like the wild beasts in the forest who were always hungry and did not know their next meal. But now, Caesar looked like a bag of bones. It was a little scary. With the help of Mai and the others, Xiao Xian was much more relaxed. He directly carried Caesar back with the stretcher. In the cave of the first stronghold, the others did not sleep well. Qiao waited at the entrance of the cave all night. Everyone was very anxious. Seeing that Mai and Xiao Xian were all back and no one was missing, she heaved a sigh of relief. We're finally back safely. Qiao looked at the people who came back and then carefully looked at Xiao Xian. Seeing that Xiao Xian was not injured, she smiled. I'm sorry to have worried everyone, Xiao Xian said. It was indeed his fault for leaving the team without permission. It's good that you're back safely. Qiao was about to ask about what happened yesterday when she saw the stretcher. Her first reaction was that something had happened to Caesar. Her second reaction was that something was wrong. Let's go in first. Mai carried the stretcher back to the cave. Xiao Xian settled Caesar down and asked for some medicine to treat external injuries for Caesar. While changing the medicine, Xiao Xian briefly told everyone what happened after he left. The people around were stunned, especially Lang Ga swallowing his saliva. Lang Jie still could not believe it. Trap zone? Caesar led the wolves to the trap zone. He did not feel pity for the traps that he had set, but he was shocked that Caesar could do such a thing. He even knew how to use traps to trick his opponents. Not only that, there was also the asphalt pit. Ang, who was standing next to Lang Jie, could not help but scratch his arm. He always felt that the hair on his arm was trembling, and he was very nervous. Ever since they started hunting, they always thought that only people could use traps to trick wild beasts and ferocious beasts. Who knew that wild beasts could also use traps and natural environmental factors to trick their opponents? If this was in the past, they would never have imagined it. Then Caesar's appearance is, he mutated, Xiao Xian said. To some extent, Caesar's change was indeed a mutation. Mutation? Lang Jie did not quite understand this word. In other words, Caesar may change from a wild beast to something closer to a ferocious beast, or even directly become a ferocious beast, Xiao Xian explained simply and straightforwardly. Everyone's jaws almost hit the ground. A wild beast in the team was enough to make them discuss for a long time. Now, Xiao Xian told them that this wild beast had become a ferocious beast. That was a ferocious beast. This was a huge leap in level. Were they going to hunt with ferocious beasts in the future? Listening to this, they were so nervous, but also excited. It's hard to say now. Let's wait until Caesar wakes up and see, Xiao Xian said. Well, I guess everyone didn't rest well yesterday. Let's rest today and go hunting tomorrow, Mai said. Xiao Xian lay down next to Caesar, leaning against the cave wall. When no one was paying attention, he took out the fire crystal that the shaman had given him from the animal skin bag. Last night, in order to use the secret engraving technique, he had consumed a lot of totem power. During the engraving, he had to maintain a high level of concentration, and after the engraving, he had to continue to be vigilant. At that time, he was too tired, so Xiao Xian grabbed the fire crystal and used it to replenish his energy. The originally fiery red fire crystal's color was a little lighter and not obvious, but Xiao Xian could see it. Just this slight change was enough for at least 3 people to absorb the energy emitted by the fire crystal. He did not expect that he had consumed so much energy unknowingly. The secret engraving technique consumed a lot of energy, so he had to be more careful in the future. When Xiao Xian and the others were resting in the cave, Mai did not go to sleep immediately, but led them to the trap area. There were indeed several wolf corpses in the trap area, but they had been eaten by other beasts and scavengers. Most of the corpses were just bloody skeletons. After such a long time, the smell of blood had already attracted some surrounding animals. Naturally, there were no intact corpses left. It's true. Qiao opened his eyes wide, and carefully checked several traps that had been set. Xian didn't lie. Well, Caesar really understood. Not only Qiao Mai and his wife, but also the others who came with them, all thought of the cubs left in the tribe. If they became like Caesar in the future, Mai, that will be a great help. Qiao said. A help that may change the entire hunting team. Everyone was still a little worried. If those cubs grew up in the future, would they be harmful to the tribe? But, on second thought, since the shaman had agreed, it was naturally a good thing. Everyone's thoughts were simple. Even if they had other ideas, if the shaman said it was okay, then it was absolutely right. Well, they just had to believe in the shaman. After thinking it through, Mai and the others felt much more relaxed. The others even urged Mai to catch 2 cubs for Yang Guang and his sister, so that they could ask Xiao Xian to help train them. Mai did not say yes, but also did not say no. At night, everyone gathered around the fire and discussed the cubs in the tribe in the future. Suddenly, Caesar, who was lying next to Xiao Xian, moved. Lang Jie, who was closest to Xiao Xian, also felt it, and immediately went over. Hey, Caesar is waking up? Lang Jie was about to take a closer look, but when he lowered his head, he saw Caesar's wolf eyes open, and he paused. Lang Jie felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave, and a chill rushed from his back to his head. The muscles all over his body tightened, and the smile on his face froze instantly. The veins on his arms stood out, and he forced himself not to pull out his stone knife and cut Caesar. Those eyes were filled with killing intent, cruelty, and coldness. Lang Jie saw such eyes every day in the forest. What's wrong? The others gathered around. Lang Jie opened his mouth, and was about to tell the others to stay away. But soon, he found that the emotions in those eyes had changed. They became much softer, and when he looked again, he found that they were still the wolf eyes he was familiar with. It was Caesar. Not the ferocious beasts in the forest. Seeing Xiao Xian coming over to check Caesar's wounds, Lang Jie moved his cold hands, and smiled. It's nothing, as long as Caesar is awake. After waking up, Caesar slowly stood up, and moved around in the cave. Why do I feel that every time Caesar comes close to me, I'm very nervous? Tu said to the people next to him. Me. Me. Tu. Ba also said. There was still meat in the cave, so Xiao Xian cut some for Caesar. After waking up, Caesar's appetite became much bigger. He ate half a deer, but he was still not full. But there was not much food left in the cave, so he did not continue eating. The next day, the hunting team set out to continue hunting. The skinny Caesar set out with the hunting team. Shouldn't we let him rest for a few more days? Mai asked Xiao Xian. No need, he's fine. Mai saw that Caesar wasn't forcing himself to walk. Instead, he seemed to be looking forward to it, as if he couldn't wait to run a lap in the forest, so he didn't object to it. The wolves were not around the giant antler deer herd, so the hunting team planned to hunt a few more deer. They drove the deer herd away, and aimed at the deer that was separated from the herd. That one. Lang Jie was about to ask Caesar to drive the deer towards them, when a dark gray shadow flashed by, and rushed towards the giant antler deer that was separated from the herd. Bang! The giant antler deer and the dark gray shadow fell down together. When they looked again, they found that the giant antler deer had fallen to the ground, and Caesar was biting its neck. Chapter 131. The day before yesterday, Caesar had been flung away by an old deer, but today, he could directly pounce on a young deer and make it fall to the ground. Just now, Caesar's speed and strength had far exceeded that of 2 days ago. Crack! With a crisp sound, the deer stopped moving. Caesar let go of the deer's neck and gasped for breath. Deer blood dripped from the wolf's teeth, and the blood on the ground grew bigger and bigger. Because of the hunting just now, Caesar's eyes were still full of murderous intent, but it could be seen that Caesar was very excited now. Looking at Caesar like this, Lang Jie and others did not dare to make a sound, let alone instruct him to drive away the separated deer. Although he had woken up and could walk and run, Caesar was still a little weak. After gasping for breath for a while, Caesar opened his mouth again and bit the deer's neck. Then, he dragged the deer in the direction of Xiao Xian. Mai and the others' eyelids twitched. Just now, he threw down the deer face to face. What was going on now? Even if Caesar had grown up, he was still much smaller than this adult deer. However, at this moment, Caesar was dragging this deer step by step. Considering Caesar's speed and strength just now, Mai and the others looked at each other. Ferocious beast. Maybe it was not as ferocious as the four-fanged wild boar, but it could be counted as a ferocious beast. Even though they knew that Caesar was not malicious, watching the wolf dragging the deer step by step, Mai and the others could not help but feel nervous. When Caesar dragged the deer past them, everyone's muscles tightened. They could also smell the smell of deer blood coming out of Caesar's breath. The momentum of blood. This was a ferocious beast. Against wild beasts, they might be able to win easily, but against ferocious beasts, they never dared to underestimate them. Every time they faced a ferocious beast, they were extremely cautious. They had never thought that they would be so close to a ferocious beast. After placing the dead deer in front of Xiao Xian, Caesar began to assist the hunting team in hunting. It had just killed one deer, so it didn't plan to hunt any more. It only helped to drive the others away. At first, everyone was very nervous, but once the hunt began, they quickly entered the zone. In the past, it was difficult for Caesar to drive away the stray deer. Sometimes, he could see the carelessness in the eyes of the deer. However, they had been attacked by wolves similar to Caesar many times before, so it was inevitable that they were afraid of wolves. Sometimes, when they saw Caesar turn and run, it was just a conditioned reflex. But now, after seeing that Caesar had killed a young giant antler deer, they knew to be afraid. Especially the stray deer, when they saw Caesar, they ran away quickly and turned around without any hesitation. As long as he didn't have to face the giant antler deer in the herd, Caesar could easily win. Fortunately, the giant antler deer were protecting their young deer, so they wouldn't leave the herd easily. As long as the number of giant antler deer was within their acceptable range, they wouldn't come out. When they dragged the prey back to the cave, the hunting team was still sighing in their hearts. Who would have thought that humans and ferocious beasts would hunt together in the past? However, on second thought, their hunting team was the first hunting team with wild beasts, and now it was also the first hunting team with ferocious beasts. Thinking about it made them a little excited. Even Mai was discussing with Xiao in private whether they should catch 2 young beasts for Yang Guang and his sister to train. Unfortunately, Yang Guang and his sister refused Mai's offer. They said that they would go catch them themselves when they became stronger. "We need to catch a strong one," Guang said. "Yes," Yang echoed. "We need to be as obedient as Caesar." "Yes." "We don't want a bald pig like Mao." "Yes." Mai shook his head and smiled as he listened to the siblings. Not all of them can mutate. Xiao Xian didn't tell them about the secret art of engraving. It was not up to Xiao Xian to explain, but up to the shaman. They would discuss it with the shaman when they got back to the tribe. The day before they went to the second location, Caesar left the hunting team, and Xiao Xian didn't follow him this time. When Caesar came back again, he was injured, but not seriously. There was a lot of blood on his fur, but most of it wasn't his. In Caesar's mouth, a wolf's neck was bitten off, and it was dragged back by Caesar. "Is this the alpha of the wolf pack?" Mai looked at the fur patterns on the dead wolf, and said in surprise. "It looks like it." Lang Jie looked at it and said. "Is Caesar going to slaughter that pack of wolves?" Someone asked. "Maybe he did." "So, there is no wolf pack in this place for the time being?" No matter whether Caesar slaughtered that wolf pack, or just killed the alpha, it was a good thing for the hunting team. At least the wolf pack was less of a threat, and they really didn't want to face such a cruel wolf pack. Caesar dragged the alpha wolf to Xiao Xian, and put it down, looking at Xiao Xian. "This is your prey. Put it in the storage cave with the other prey in the hunting team, and bring it back later. Skin it and feed it to your nest," Xiao Xian said. Caesar seemed to be satisfied with Xiao Xian's suggestion. After putting it down, he didn't look at it anymore, and just lay down to rest. The wounds on its body had already scabbed, so it didn't need any more medicine. As soon as Caesar left, Yang Guang and his sister, Tu, Jiaba and other young warriors gathered around, and looked at the dead alpha wolf with interest. They didn't dare to get close to the living ones, but it was okay to look at the dead ones. Even at this moment, the alpha wolf still looked ferocious. Just like how Mao was interested in the thorn black wind, these young warriors were also curious about this alpha wolf. They touched it from its teeth to its claws, and kept praising it. No wonder it's an alpha wolf. Look at its teeth and claws. "Brother Xian, will Caesar also become an alpha wolf in the future?" Yang Guang and his sister looked at Xiao Xian. "I don't know," Xiao Xian said. "Could a wolf in the hunting team become an alpha wolf?" Everyone shook their heads. But there were still many cubs in the tribe. Maybe he could really become an alpha wolf. But they didn't know how long they would have to wait. The following hunting was much easier than usual. With Caesar's help, Mai and the others felt less pressure. After all, there were many young warriors in the hunting team, and one more strong helper meant one more guarantee. When the hunting team came to an end, they went back along the route. When they passed by the hunting area of the first stronghold, they didn't see a wolf with a spotted pattern on its back. That wolf pack might have disappeared from this forest. After these days, although Caesar still looked very thin, he was much better than when he just woke up. He would be even better after a while. Caesar hunted for food every day, so he ate a lot. If only Xiao Xian raised him, he couldn't afford it. Fortunately, he hunted a lot of prey for himself, so he could bring them back with him. On the day when the hunting team returned to the tribe, Caesar once again aroused a heated discussion. But Xiao Xian didn't say too much until he was summoned by the shaman. "You used the secret art of engraving?" Although there was doubt in his tone, the shaman's eyes were very sure. Even if the ancestors used the secret art of engraving, the success rate was only 50%. But Xiao Xian succeeded on his first try. The shaman didn't know whether he was lucky or not. The reason for Caesar's change could be hidden from others, but not from the shaman. Besides, Xiao Xian didn't want to hide it from the shaman. Xiao Xian told the shaman the details of what happened at that time. He said, "When I saw Caesar's change, I was shocked. After all, there was no such record in the ancient scrolls left by the ancestors." In order to be sure, the shaman carefully looked through the animal skin scrolls related to the secret art of engraving. Indeed, there was no record of Caesar's change. According to the animal skin scrolls, after the engraving was successful, the changes of the hunting dogs didn't happen so fast or so violently. The effect of the secret art of engraving seemed to be a little different from what the ancestors said. The shaman asked Xiao Xian to bring Caesar to see for himself. After a careful examination, he felt that Caesar's change was much greater than what the ancestors had recorded. Not only that, but Caesar didn't stop changing after he woke up. As time went by, Caesar's change became more and more obvious. He didn't stop growing. Sometimes when he moved around in the house, old Ku was afraid that he would knock down the wall. "When Cha-Cha meets the requirements, I'll engrave it on him and see his change," Xiao Xian said. After the first attempt, Xiao Xian was confident that he could successfully use the secret art of engraving again. In fact, in retrospect, the secret art of engraving was not as difficult as what was recorded in the ancient scrolls. If the shaman knew what Xiao Xian was thinking, he would probably run to the fire pit and kowtow to the ancestors who had passed away. With such talent, why didn't he become a shaman? Hearing Xiao Xian mention Cha-Cha, the shaman didn't agree. "No, Cha-Cha is different from Caesar," the shaman said. Xiao Xian wasn't sure what the shaman meant, but before he could continue asking, the shaman talked about something else. Since Caesar's engraving was successful, the other cubs in the tribe had to be developed well. In the shaman's opinion, he would be satisfied if 1 out of 10 cubs in the tribe could grow up to Caesar's level. The cubs, who were growing up, were not as obedient as Caesar. They were harder to control, and most of the people in the tribe were not good-tempered. If it weren't for Xiao Xian's frequent lectures and tips, they would have already started fighting, and more cubs would have ended up in the pot. After leaving the shaman's place and going down the mountain, Xiao Xian saw several cubs following behind Caesar. Compared to when they had just arrived, the cubs had grown up a lot. By this time next year, they would be a small wolf pack. When the several young men saw Xiao Xian, they hurried to ask for advice from Xiao Xian. Some of them didn't take it seriously before, but when they saw the changed Caesar, they changed their attitude. After Xiao Xian left, the shaman came to the place where the ancient scrolls were kept. He opened a huge stone box, in which many ancient scrolls were neatly placed. The shaman took out several original ancient scrolls, all of which were related to the secret art of engraving. It seemed that the matter of publicizing the hunting dogs and the secret art of engraving could be put on the agenda. The shaman thought to himself. After taking out several animal skin scrolls, the shaman looked at the ancient scrolls in the big stone box, sighed deeply, and closed the stone lid. He believed that the dusty history would gradually reveal itself in front of everyone. Chapter 132. When Xiao Xian wasn't out hunting, he would go up the mountain every few days to hand in the animal skin rolls that the shaman asked him to draw. This time, Xiao Xian didn't draw the Wu roll, but an ordinary animal skin roll. The shaman wanted to let everyone know that their ancestors used hunting dogs to stimulate their enthusiasm for raising and training young beasts. However, there were some things that couldn't be disclosed, so he could only choose to disclose some. When the content was selected, the Xiao Xian, who was better at drawing than most people, would draw it. The annotations would also be selected from some parts of the original version, and not all of it would be written. Compared to the Wu roll, which required the use of the power of inheritance, the ordinary picture rolls were much easier to draw. In less than 10 days, Xiao Xian finished all 100 picture rolls with annotations. On this day, Xiao Xian took the last 10 animal skin rolls up the mountain and handed them to the shaman. The people in the tribe were already used to Xiao Xian's frequent visits to the shaman's place. Even the guards at the gate didn't stop him. The shaman said that if Xiao Xian came, he could go in directly. These are the last 10. Xiao Xian put the 10 animal skin rolls on the stone table in front of the shaman, and let him check them to make sure that there was nothing out of the plan. The shaman quickly opened them and glanced at them, then put them aside. He didn't ask Xiao Xian to leave immediately like the previous times. When Xiao Xian saw the shaman like this, he knew that the old man still had something to say, and it wouldn't be just a few words. He sat up straight and waited for the shaman to continue. Seeing Xiao Xian's reaction, the shaman smiled first, and then his smile faded. He said, "Do you know what I, the chief, and the elders of the tribe are discussing?" Xiao Xian shook his head. He knew that during this period of time, the chief, the 2 team leaders, and several senior warriors with more authority in the tribe often came to the shaman's place together. Seeing such a scene, he knew that it was not a small matter, so every time Xiao Xian came, he would not stay for long. Xiao Xian was not curious about the things that the shaman would tell him sooner or later. But now, the shaman didn't seem to intend to hide it anymore, at least not from Xiao Xian. The shaman took out a large animal skin roll and spread it out on the stone table. "Do you know what this picture is?" Xiao Xian leaned forward and looked at the drawing on the animal skin roll. Although the drawing was rough, it could still be seen. This is the tribe and the hunting route. The animal skin scroll on the stone table was equivalent to a simple map. It only showed the location of the tribe and a few hunting routes. Most of the drawings on the animal skin roll were in black, including the tribe and several hunting routes. However, one of them was in red, and this red route was not one of the hunting routes that Xiao Xian knew. The shaman raised his finger and pointed at the red route. "This is the content of our discussion." Xiao Xian stared at the line and thought for a while. He raised his eyebrows and looked at the shaman. "The tribe is planning to open up a new hunting route?" The shaman didn't expect Xiao Xian to guess it so quickly. After all, for most people in the tribe, they had never thought of opening up a new hunting route. Even if they saw the map, they might not think in that direction. But the shaman was only stunned for a short while, and then he smiled. Indeed. There were more and more people in the tribe, but the number of people who went out to hunt was limited. Although the warriors who had special family situations or were injured were excluded from the hunting list, it was inevitable that some healthy people were left behind. It was too wasteful. But it was unnecessary to increase the number of people in each hunting group. On the contrary, it would be worse. Going out to hunt was not always better with more people. In the records left by the ancestors, there were also disadvantages of having too many people. These years, the shaman had been thinking about opening up a new hunting route, and Caesar's change strengthened his determination. If a batch of cubs in the tribe grew up, and the engraving was successful, they would be a great help. This was a force that could not be underestimated. In this way, it was necessary to open up a new hunting route. Therefore, the shaman found the chief, 2 team leaders, and several old warriors who had more say in the tribe to discuss. If the shaman did not mention opening up a new hunting route, the others would not insist on it. But since the shaman mentioned it, the old warriors were all very excited. For them, this was an epoch-making matter. They respected and admired the ancestors, but they also listened to the shaman. On this matter, the people who were called over were basically supportive. Opening up a new hunting route was not something that could be done in a day, and the preparatory work had to be done. The most important thing was the selection of people. After the discussion, they finally decided to start the plan in 3 years. If it went well, it might be started in a year. If some unpredictable changes happened, it would be delayed. If it could not be carried out in 3 years, the shaman would cancel the plan. As for the number of people who would open up the new hunting route, it was preliminarily decided to be 30 people. The most important thing was quality, not quantity. And this quality did not necessarily mean that they were strong. It had to be considered from all aspects. After the preliminary decision, the 2 team leaders and several old warriors went back and secretly told their children and grandchildren about this matter. They hoped that their children and grandchildren could perform well in the next 1 or 2 years, and then they would be more likely to be selected into the list of 30 people. They were not afraid of opening up a new hunting route. Almost everyone who heard the news was very excited, especially those young warriors. They were now in very good physical condition, and every time they went out to hunt, their performance was more eye-catching. Of course, they would try their best to fight for the quota of 30 people. Opening up a new hunting route like the ancestors was an honor that would be recorded in the history of the tribe. How could they not be excited? No wonder there were some people training crazily in the training ground recently. After the shaman finished speaking, he looked at Xiao Xian, who was sitting across the stone table. Xiao Xian's reaction was different from the others. As far as the shaman knew, everyone who knew about this was very excited. Some of them were even excited for several days. Even the chief was no exception. The chief and the 2 team leaders naturally had to participate in opening up a new hunting route. But why was Xiao Xian so calm? Was he not optimistic about the opening of the new hunting route? The shaman looked at Xiao Xian, who was thinking with his eyelids down. He was very curious about what Xiao Xian was thinking. Xiao Xian was silent for a while, and looked up at the shaman. He did not talk about the opening of the new hunting route, but asked, "Have you ever thought about contacting other tribes?" When Xiao Xian said other tribes, there was no uncertainty at all. The shaman could hear that Xiao Xian was very sure that there were other tribes. The shaman, who was originally thinking about the opening of the new hunting route, now had a sharp look in his eyes. There was no smile on his face, which was completely different from his usual calm demeanor. At this moment, the shaman was like a war knife, and the blade of this war knife was pointed at Xiao Xian. At that moment, Xiao Xian almost jumped away, but he controlled himself and sat in the same place. He maintained the same expression as before, looking at the shaman. The atmosphere was tense for a while, and then the shaman gradually withdrew his aura. At first glance, he looked no different from usual, but the stiffness and seriousness on his face were extremely rare. He was not in the mood to talk about the opening of the new hunting route. The shaman took a deep breath and stared at Xiao Xian's eyes. "How do you know? Were there other people outside the tribe?" When the people in the tribe were bored, they would talk about it in private. They heard that there were other tribes, but they only existed in rumors. Many people thought that they were the only tribe in the world, but some people believed that there were other tribes. It was just that the world was too big for them to go out. In the tribe, there were probably only 5 people who knew the exact answer. The shaman was undoubtedly the one who knew the most. After all, he could understand the Wu role that was passed down from generation to generation, and he knew more things that others did not know. However, the shaman remembered that he did not show Xiao Xian any Wu role about other tribes. "I came out from a cave near the foot of the mountain. In that cave, there was a stone room, and there were paintings on the walls of the stone room," Xiao Xian said. The shaman felt his heart suddenly beat. He was not sure whether there were paintings in the cave or not. Someone once went to the cave to have a look, and except for some very old broken stone tools, there was nothing else. The paintings were covered. Xiao Xian told the shaman how he found the paintings, "But after I woke up, I covered them with stone powder when I left the cave. So far, no one else has seen them except me." The shaman was relieved, but he was also curious about the paintings in the cave at the foot of the mountain. He did not remember any related records. "What are the paintings?" the shaman asked. "There are hunting dogs, farmland, and exquisite jars, and?" the shaman asked. Xiao Xian paused and said, "One day, we will return to the old land. The glory is still there, and the fire of Yinjiao will never die." When Xiao Xian said the first word of this sentence, the shaman's hands began to tremble. This was a sign that he could not control his emotions. "Zan." The shaman's voice was a little hoarse. In the list of people recorded in the ancient scroll, the third name was Zan. And what Xiao Xian said just now was also recorded in the ancient scroll. No longer excited about opening a new route, the shaman's face was bitter. "If we can go out, why bother opening a new route? Xiao Xian looked at the shaman. The shaman's eyes were red, and he almost burst into tears. It seemed that his emotions would not calm down for a while. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian still did not say what was recorded in his notebook. When Xiao Xian walked out of the stone house, the shaman was still in low spirits. Originally, Xiao Xian did not intend to tell the shaman about the murals in the caves so soon, but he did not expect to encounter the plan of opening a new route. After thinking about it, he told the shaman about the murals. It seemed that the shaman did not want to go out, and many ancestors had probably tried before, but still did not succeed. Alas, there was still a long way to go. While walking, Xiao Xian suddenly heard a "ao-ao" sound coming from above. When he looked up, Xiao Xian wanted to throw a spear over. At the moment, the Cha-Cha was holding a cub, and the cub was obviously trained by someone in the tribe. It was crying out in fear. "Cha-Cha, get down here." Chapter 133. Many people who raised cubs had little patience during training. Every day when they went to bed, they would think, why don't we cook them tomorrow? But seeing the changes in Caesar, some people had expectations and decided to continue raising them. Xiao Xian said that cubs needed frequent training, so they took time out every day to train them. If it was inconvenient in the tribe, they would take them to the training ground. In the mountains and forests, many young beasts learned how to hunt by playing around, such as searching, chasing, pouncing on food, biting, and other skills. After training, some cubs would show their talents and surpass their peers in some aspects, while others were more ordinary. However, in the tribe, there were still cubs left, and they were very talented. When these people took their cubs to the mountains around the training ground to train, Cha-Cha liked to make trouble for them. Ray was originally training his own cub, teaching it how to listen to instructions and lurk. As he was talking, he heard a soft sound beside him. It was the sound of an object flying quickly. He looked to the side and found that the cub was gone. Looking up, Ray found that Xiao Xian's eagle was holding his cub and flying in a circle above his head. No matter how he shouted and threatened, it did not let go of the cub. Instead, it flew higher and higher, and then flapped its wings and flew away. Cha-Cha flew back to the tribe with the cub, just in time to meet Xiao Xian, who was going down the mountain. Cha-Cha did not take other people's words to heart, but it still listened to Xiao Xian. It did not directly throw the cub. If it did, Xiao Xian would not catch it, and the cub would die. After landing, Cha-Cha threw the cub to Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian caught it, looked at it, and recognized that it was Ray's cub. He did not know what species this cub was, and many people in the tribe did not care about it. Xiao Xian remembered that Ray named this cub Meng. At first glance, Meng's appearance looked a bit like a hyena, but if you look closely, you will find many differences from hyenas. It had longer and more powerful jaws and a mouth full of sharp teeth. It was a carnivorous beast that Ray's hunting group often encountered. In terms of habits, it was more similar to wolves. Compared to wolves, Meng's species had a longer and narrower body shape, and their skulls were relatively larger. Adult individuals were covered with strong and powerful muscles, and they could run very fast. They were a kind of predator that the hunting team had to be vigilant against. Lei also took advantage of their group battle to capture Meng, who was still in its infancy. Although it was startled when Cha-Cha brought it up into the air, it did not forget to bare its teeth at Cha-Cha after being caught by Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian checked Meng. Meng was not scratched by Cha-Cha and did not suffer any other injuries. He guessed that Cha-Cha just wanted to scare Lei and Meng. It was purely a prank. While Xiao Xian was checking, Lei caught up with them. He was so tired that he was panting. When he looked at Cha-Cha, the veins on his forehead stood out. Cha-Cha could fly directly, and it was more convenient in the air. However, Lei had to run down the mountain, and there were many twists and turns on the way. It took him a long time to catch up. As soon as it saw Lei, Meng, who had been put on the ground by Xiao Xian, immediately ran to Cha-Cha, who was behind Xiao Xian, and stood beside Lei's legs. Good training. Xiao Xian said. From Meng's behavior, it could be seen that it had a strong dependence on Lei. This was a good sign. It was easier for it to follow orders, and it was easier for it to survive the first hunt. Although it was different from Xiao Xian's hunting team, and they were on opposite sides under certain circumstances, Lei's attitude towards Xiao Xian was much better because of Xiao Xian's training. As for the 1-year promise mentioned last winter, now it seemed like a joke. Everyone knew that Xiao Xian had found a very precious fire crystal in the first hunt after the ritual ceremony. Many people in the hunting team had been carried out of the danger zone by him. That was also one of the achievements of the hunt. If they were to compare achievements, no one could compare with him at all. Therefore, last winter's 1-year promise, when winter came this year, everyone would still present their results for the year according to the agreement. However, Xiao Xian's results were not included. Lei had no choice but to accept this result. After checking that Meng was not injured, Lei looked at Cha-Cha, who was behind Xiao Xian, and said, "Xian, you should take care of it. It has been causing trouble recently." "Yes, but you also need to train Meng to pay attention to the birds in the sky," Xiao Xian said. Lei nodded, and planned to leave with Meng. But he stopped after 2 steps and turned to ask Xiao Xian, "Do you know what the chief and the team leaders discussed at the shaman's place these days?" "You know?" Xiao Xian looked at Lei. Since there were elders in Lei's family who participated in the discussion of the new route, they should have been told about it. "Of course I know, and I can tell you. But you have to exchange it with something else," Lei said. "What do you want to know?" Xiao Xian asked. "I want to know the specific reason why Caesar became like this." Lei's eyes were shining with expectation. Between wild beasts and ferocious beasts, he naturally preferred the ferocious beast. If Meng could also become a ferocious beast in the future, you don't need to tell me about the discussion between the team leaders. As for what you want to know, you will know in a few days. After that, Xiao Xian made a gesture, and Cha-Cha immediately flew up and went down the mountain with Xiao Xian. Looking at a man and an eagle leaving, Lei frowned. Could it be that Xian already knew about the new route? Didn't they say that only a few people knew about it? And they were all blood relatives. But why did the shaman tell him? As for the reason he wanted to know about Caesar's change, what did "you will know in a few days" mean? 3 days later, the shaman asked people to distribute 100 animal skin rolls, which recorded the secret engraving technique and the hunting dogs of the ancestors, to all the tribes on the mountain. Although it was not enough to give one to each family, it was enough to give one to several families. 100 animal skin rolls set off a big wave in the originally calm tribe. The matter of training cubs to hunt actually existed from the beginning of the ancestors. The ancestors were really powerful and domineering. There was also a magical engraving technique. Was it related to Caesar's change into a ferocious beast? The shaman was really omnipotent. The shaman did not say how Caesar changed, nor did he say who made the engraving technique for Caesar. But, according to the record on the animal skin roll, only the shaman could use the engraving technique. Naturally, everyone thought that the shaman had already made the engraving technique for Caesar, and that was why there was such a change. When the shaman distributed these animal skin rolls, he also said that if there was a suitable beast in the tribe that was comparable to the hunting dogs, he would make the engraving technique for that beast. The shaman drew a big pie for everyone. How to eat it, and how to eat more, depended on each person. So, the people who had lost their patience became enthusiastic again. Even when they went out to hunt, they caught a few small beasts, knocked them out, tied them up, and brought them back to the tribe to train the hunting skills of the cubs. Some people did not intend to raise cubs, but after seeing the animal skin rolls distributed by the shaman, they also had the idea. For a time, the number of cubs in the tribe, which had decreased sharply, gradually increased. But, most of them were still in the pot. 1 year later, the first batch of cubs that were caught back to the tribe seemed to be more mature. Maybe they were not adults in their species, but most of the wild beasts in the forest could participate in hunting at this age, either by themselves or with their blood relatives. At this time, some people in the hunting team began to have ideas. They asked the team leaders for instructions, hoping to bring the beasts they had trained. In their opinion, the beasts they had trained were already very powerful. When they were in the tribe, they could often catch some stone rats. They were also very obedient to orders, fierce enough and strong enough to attack. The more they thought about it, the more they felt that the beasts they had trained were much better than Caesar's. Not only one or two people had this idea, but several people had the same idea. They had been raising the cubs for almost 2 years. They had spent a lot of time and effort on these cubs. Now that they were so strong, it was time for them to go hunting. The shaman looked at the team leader's requests, but did not refute. He just reminded them again about some of the things that Xiao Xian had told them to pay attention to. Seeing that the shaman, the chief, and the team leaders all agreed, several warriors took the trained beasts and swaggered across the path of glory. They set off to show off. However, when the hunting team came back again, there were no beasts around them. They did not see the beasts that had followed them before they set off. 5 of them went out, and only 1 came back. The only one that came back was Meng, raised by Lei. Even though Meng came back, he had many wounds on his body. However, when he remembered that Caesar had also come back with wounds, Lei was relieved. Anyway, as the only one that came back, Meng was already very good compared to the other 4 beasts. Seeing the result this time, some people were very worried, and began to doubt whether their cubs could come back safely in the future. Among the 4 beasts that did not come back, 2 of them could not control their fierceness when they were hunting prey. They did not listen to orders and attacked the hunting team. The result was predictable. They were killed on the spot by the warriors of the hunting team. As for the other 2 that did not come back, one of them failed to hunt, and was kicked in the head by the prey. It did not last long before it died. As for the last one, it ran away. No matter how they called it, it did not stop, and it did not look back. Seeing the result, some people who wanted to take their beasts out to hunt immediately decided to wait. Some of the things that Xiao Xian had told them to pay attention to, such as dependence and self-control of the beasts, had to be strengthened. In the next few hunts, except for Meng that was brought by Lei, several beasts that many people did not think highly of also came back successfully. For example, Liao, the cave lion raised by Mo Xia, the bald pig raised by Mao, and the beasts raised by Yang Guang and his sister. Yang Guang and his sister also caught 2 beasts when they were hunting. The elder brother, Yang, brought back a cub that looked like a hyena, named An. And the one that Guang brought back was a big bird's egg, which was stolen from a bird's nest. She had always hoped to have a bird like Cha-Cha. However, when she hatched the egg according to the method that Xiao Xian had told her, she found that the bird could not fly. It belonged to a group of wingless birds, similar to forest raccoons. But she did not put the bird into the pot, but continued to raise it, and named it Jing. After raising it for a year, the 2 beasts raised by Yang Guang and his sister were taken out to participate in a hunt. Their performance was not satisfactory, which made me very happy. Chapter 134. According to the ancient scroll, every hound that could be engraved by the shaman using the secret engraving technique was carefully selected. The number of hounds in the tribe that could barely meet the requirements could be counted with 2 hands. The shaman wanted to engrave these hounds as soon as possible. After all, the ancient scrolls said that the effect of engraving in the early stage of the beast was better. The success rate and the chance of growing into ferocious beasts were higher. If he waited a few years or decades, even if the engraving was successful, the beast would not have much room to grow. However, according to the ancient teachings, he had to make sure that they really met the requirements. The shaman was a little hesitant about this. Therefore, the shaman gave Xiao Xian a task to record the training, life and hunting of the first batch of beasts. So far, the shaman had written down 9 names on the animal skin roll in his hand. Xiao Xian handed the results to the shaman and waited for his opinion. The shaman had the right to decide whether to engrave these beasts or not. The chosen ones would be the first batch of beasts in the tribe to be engraved by the shaman. Xiao Xian naturally would not do it without permission. Whether it was Caesar, who had been engraved by Xiao Xian, or the other beasts, as long as the shaman could engrave a batch of them, they would become the 9 beasts with special status in the tribe. From birds, to ferocious beasts, to turtles, these 9 beasts could be said to be related to the sea, land, and air. However, how they would develop in the future and whether they would be the best or not was unknown. Only time could tell. Looking at the animal skin roll handed over by Xiao Xian, about half an hour later, the shaman sighed and said, "These beasts look good, but I am still worried." "What do you mean?" The shaman looked at Xiao Xian and said slowly, "When they are separated, their performance is not bad. But, what will happen when they are together?" The shaman did not expect these beasts to be close and cooperate perfectly, but he at least wanted to make sure that they would not fight when they were together. When hunting, many beasts would fight with each other. If there was a big conflict, after the engraving, the situation would be more obvious. In that case, it would not be safe. Xiao Xian was silent for a while and said, "So, you want to see them together? Not bad." The shaman used his finger to point at the row of names on the animal skin roll. Out of the 9 names, 2 of them would not be involved. What he meant by it together was 7 of them. As for the other 2, they didn't need to cooperate with others. One was the tortoise in the medicine house, and the other was a snow-white falcon that Gigu brought back from the Greenland. The reason why Gigu's team often had better harvests than Ta's advance group was because of this falcon. However, Gigu didn't tell them about it until now, and brought it back to the tribe. These 2 were special cases. Other than them, the remaining 7 had to cooperate. Looking at the 7 names, Xiao Xian could only sigh inwardly. How do I put them together? Even if the 7 of them formed a group, it was completely different from the wolf pack in Xiao Xian's imagination. From a modern point of view, they were just a mixed army. There were too many species, and none of them were the same. Even their tempers were different. Xiao Xian stayed at the shaman's place and discussed with him for a long time. Then he took a piece of animal skin roll that was similar to the imperial edict written by the shaman and left the stone house with a sigh. He went to inform the beasts on the imperial edict and the people who raised them. Gigu's hunting team came back yesterday, and Ta's team would set off tomorrow. Now everyone was in the tribe, so Xiao Xian had to inform them one by one. The first thing he went to was Mao. When he arrived at the door of the team leader's house, there was no one at the door, and he didn't hear anything inside. Xiao Xian shouted, "See ya!" Bang! A rather sturdy, bald pig broke out of the wall. Xiao Xian didn't know what to say. Looking at the big hole in the stone wall behind Siya, Xiao Xian decided to leave as soon as possible. Otherwise, Ta would be mad when he came back. Now, Siya's 4 teeth had grown out, and it looked much more majestic. However, it still had the title of bald pig. After Siya broke through the wall, Mao came out with a bitter face. He scolded Xiao Xian, "Why did you call it at this time? What happened to it?" Xiao Xian asked. "It was sleeping. Maybe it was dreaming. It's going to hunt tomorrow, so it's very excited." Mao rubbed his face hard. "If you have something to say, just say it. I have to fix the wall before my father comes back, or he will beat me again." Most of the houses on the mountain were made of stone. Siya's personality was not stable yet. It was like a young man, easily agitated. Once it was agitated, the house would be destroyed. Ta didn't allow it to live in the house, but as long as Ta was not there, Siya would force its way in. The door of Ta's house had been expanded several times. Xiao Xian didn't waste any time. He handed over the imperial edict of the shaman. "Read it yourself." Mao was thinking about how to fix the wall, but after reading the scroll, he forgot all about fixing the wall and getting beaten up. He rubbed his hands together and couldn't wait to set off. It was written that if the result was satisfactory, the shaman would choose the best one to perform the secret engraving skill. After 2 years of waiting, How could Mao not be excited when he finally saw the legendary, secret engraving skill? When are we going? Mao asked hurriedly. We won't be able to make it tomorrow. Let's do it next time. Xiao Xian said. Mao was a little disappointed, but it wouldn't be long. He could take advantage of this hunting to practice more. Next time, he would be able to amaze the world. Sia must be the best one, the shaman mentioned. Ignoring the excited Mao, Xiao Xian continued to inform the others to go to Lei's house, which was also on the mountain. Lei's pet, Meng, was also on the shaman's list. After Mao and Lei, the third one to be informed was Mo, who now lived on the mountainside. When Xiao Xian arrived, Mao, the cave lion, was lazily lying at the door and rubbing the ground. After hunting, it would sleep for a few days after eating and drinking. Since Mao was in the tribe, many people were less afraid of the ferocious cave lions. Seeing Xiao Xian, Mao, who was rolling at the door and licking its paws, swung its tail and knocked on the door. Soon, Mo came to open the door. He looked like he had just woken up. When he was alone, he was in good spirits after hunting. But since he took Mao with him, although he had more prey, he was physically and mentally exhausted. Mao's temper was not as good as Caesar's, so he had to keep an eye on it. What's the matter? Mo yawned and kicked the cave lion away. Looking at the cave lion, which was rolling on the ground lazily because of Mo's kick, Xiao Xian was not surprised at all. He gave the imperial edict to Mo and told him what he had said to Mao. Looking at the words on the animal skin roll, Mo shivered and was no longer sleepy. He breathed quickly. I know, I will train it well. After leaving Mo's place, Xiao Xian went to Qiaomai and his wife's house to inform Yang Guang and his sister about this matter. At the same time, the shaman chose to let the mixed army join the first hunting group, which was Mai's group. He had to tell Mai about this. When Xiao Xian was discussing with Qiaomai and his wife, An and Jing were playing in the expanded yard. The two of them did not match the elegant name An Jing at all. Yang Guang and his sister were cheering them on. An, attack from behind. Avoid its claws. Jing, pat it, peck it with your beak. Yes, that's it. An was an animal that looked like a hyena but had hooves. Looking at its feet, one would think it was a vegetarian. But looking at the sharp teeth in its mouth, one would know that it was actually a carnivore. It looked like a sheep in wolf's skin, but the skin did not cover its feet. Beneath this peaceful name was actually a ferocious beast. As for Jing, Xiao Xian admired this kind of bird that used its head as a hoe. With that kind of head, when it ran and bumped into the prey, it would shake its head as if it had hit the prey with a brick. Sometimes it would kill the prey with a peck. It was totally different from Cha-Cha. After notifying them one by one, Xiao Xian went home to pack up the tools for tomorrow's departure. Since the end of last year, Xiao Xian had taken Cha-Cha out for hunting. And Cha-Cha did not disappoint. It performed well and did not make any trouble. At most, it caught a baby deer from the herd without permission. Later, when the giant horns in the herd saw the figure in the sky, they all became alert. The first time, Cha-Cha succeeded because of their carelessness. Later, when they became alert, it was difficult for Cha-Cha to succeed again. More than 20 days later, Ta took the hunting team out and returned. Then, Gigu's team also took turns to set out. But this time, Mo and Lei stayed in the tribe to train with Xiao Xian, Mao, and Yang Guang and his sister. As Xiao Xian thought, when these beasts gathered together, they could fight for a small stone rat for a long time, let alone cooperate. Fortunately, Caesar, as a ferocious beast, was here. As soon as he saw them fighting fiercely, he went to mediate. During this period, the people in the tribe often heard the roars of beasts coming from the training ground. At first, they were nervous, but soon, they got used to it. They could tell which beast was roaring. Although these beasts did not get along well at the beginning, it was still humans who played an important role in it. Because of human factors and Caesar's violent suppression, these beasts finally stopped fighting after 5 days. 10 days later, these beasts learned the preliminary cooperation. 15 days later, their cooperation was further improved. 20 days later, they could barely satisfy Xiao Xian. The shaman did not expect these beasts to cooperate well. After all, they might still hunt separately in the future. This time, it was just a way to test their temperament again. As long as they obeyed all the orders and returned safely, the shaman would definitely mark them immediately. So, on the day of departure, as long as the tribe was not on patrol, they all gathered on both sides of the path of glory to watch the team. In the team, the conspicuous beasts became the focus of everyone's discussion. Mai felt a lot of pressure. A few years ago, they would guard against the beasts when hunting, but now they were standing in their own team. Lang Jie touched his neck uncomfortably. Behind him was Guang's forest raccoons. He was afraid that the forest raccoons would peck him. His fragile neck could not withstand a peck from the forest raccoons. The shaman stood on the top of the mountain, looking at the hunting team going down. He bowed to the fire pit, praying for the ancestors' blessing and that each beast could come back safely. There were at least hundreds of cubs in the first batch, but today, only a few of them were left. How difficult it was. Although the shaman felt that these beasts were certainly not as good as the hunting dogs of the ancestors, they should not be too bad, right? Chapter 135. The team was a little big, so the warriors in the hunting group were all very curious about the beasts that came with them. When Caesar came with them for the first time, everyone was worried. Now they were used to it, and when they saw so many beasts in their own hunting group, they felt a little proud. Look, our hunting group is the first one to bring so many beasts with them. However, when they really climbed over the mountain and came to the first stronghold, they found that it was not a good thing. With the addition of these beasts, the amount of prey they could hunt decreased significantly. Xiao Xian did not put them all together at once. When the hunting group went out, they also divided into 2 groups, and the 7 beasts that came with them were also divided into 2 groups. Mao, Mo, and Lei brought their own beasts and followed Mai's group, while Yang Guang and his sister followed Xiao's group. As for Xiao Xian, his main task this time was to record the performance of these beasts and show it to the shaman. So, to some extent, Xiao Xian was like a teacher checking the students' grades, and these, primary school students, were doing their best to show their excellent performance. Coming to a strange environment, they were a little restrained at first, but after a few days of adaptation, they were able to hunt freely. 3 days later, the hunting group returned to the cave. Xiao Xian recorded today's observation on the animal skin roll, while the others kept glancing at Xiao Xian. They wanted to know what Xiao Xian had recorded, but Xiao Xian did not show it to them, and even if he showed it to them, they could not understand it. Since they could not see the record, they could only test it with words. Brother Xian, what do you think of our performance these days? Yang Guang and his sister were sent to inquire. Not bad. Xiao Xian did not raise his head, and continued to write symbols that the others could not understand on the animal skin roll. What did not bad mean? Was he satisfied or not? They exchanged glances, and then Lei, the oldest among them, said, I think we can challenge something more difficult. Every day, he would catch those metabao beasts, giant tapirs, and giant antlered deer. According to the point of view of most warriors in the tribe, the difficulty of hunting and one's strength could not be reflected without some serious injuries. Since he was going to show the results to the shaman, he had to show them something even better. So what if he was injured? What do you want to do? You want to challenge the giant horn in the giant antler deer herd? Mao said sarcastically. Ray shook his head. There are too many giant horns. It's too difficult. I heard there's a new thorn black wind in one of the pools. She only came out at night. Then what do you want to hunt? Horned rhinoceros. There's more. Yang Guang and his sister joined in the discussion. There's a giant bear at the asphalt pit. They were arguing over who to challenge next. The argument in the cave gave Xiao Xian a headache. He waved his hand and said to those who were arguing, "Stop arguing. Let me be alone." The cave quieted down for a while. But soon, Xiao Xian felt something was wrong. He looked up and saw a giant bird's beak. Xiao Xian was speechless. He pushed the big-headed bird aside. "I'm not talking about you. Go play somewhere else." According to the observation of these days, Xiao Xian analyzed the advantages and disadvantages of these beasts. Xiao Xian also heard their discussion. If you really want to challenge something more difficult, you can try that giant bear. But you have to plan well. Only those who can go back alive will have hope. Those who die here will have nothing. Xiao Xian still had to remind them. Otherwise, if these people were too hot-blooded and overestimated themselves, he would not be able to explain it to the shaman when he went back. If they wanted to challenge something more difficult, they had to work together. One or two of them could not defeat the giant bear. After all, the giant bear was a ferocious beast. The two beasts raised by Yang Guang and his sister played together since they were young. When they grew older, they fought each other at home. When they came out, they worked together to fight against the outside world. They formed a tacit understanding between them. At the same time, they also learned self-protection. For example, before they left the tribe, Guang's forest raccoons learned not to chase its prey from the front, but from the side, because it was easy to be trampled from the back. Yang's forest raccoons also learned to dodge attacks more flexibly. This was the main reason why these two beasts were more successful than the other ones. Their cooperation in the past few days was obvious to all. 2 days later, they went out together and went to the asphalt pit. For their sake, Chiao Mai and his wife did not bring anyone to hunt. They hid in the surroundings, in case of accidents, and went out to help. Xiao Xian asked Caesar to help them and act according to the situation. "Xian, you're not going to help?" Lang Jie asked Xiao Xian, who was hiding in another tree. "No, they have to rely on themselves," Xiao Xian said. This was also the shaman's idea, but he needed Xiao Xian to keep an eye on them. When necessary, he and Caesar would help them together. Thinking of the conversation with the shaman that day, Xiao Xian sighed in a low voice, "The old faker is squeezing me dry." "What?" Lang Jie was nervously paying attention to the other side, so he did not hear what Xiao Xian said. "No, I said they did well today." When Xiao Xian and Lang Jie were talking, Cha-Cha in the sky had already shouted, which meant that the other side had begun to act. When they could not beat the other side in terms of force, they had to outsmart it. According to their strategy, they first irritated the giant bear, then led it to the asphalt pit, and then knocked it down. Xiao Xian could not see the situation in the forest from where he was, but there were people like Mai around the place where the giant bear was active. If something happened, they would naturally blow the whistle. After a while, Xiao Xian heard a loud roar, and felt that the forest next to him shook several times. Soon, the sound of footsteps on the ground was also heard. Although it was heavy, it was also very fast. If one did not listen carefully, it was almost impossible to distinguish the sound of each step. In such loud and fast footsteps, there were also many other footsteps, such as the sound of hooves. Whoosh! A silhouette shot out. It was Ah Yang's pet. Following it was Forest Rakos and Lei's Meng. After the three rushed out of the forest, they ran in 3 directions. The giant bear, which almost caught up with the prey, paused at that moment, and then chased after Forest Rakos. Unfortunately, it was still 1 step behind. The big feet of Forest Rakos were not slow. It ran into one of the thin aisles in the asphalt belt like the wind. After running in, Forest Rakos vigorously moved its jaws. Its big mouth was hollow, so when it smacked its mouth, it would make a banging sound. Every time it was emotional, it would make such a sound. At this moment, even people who did not know Forest Rakos could feel the ridicule in it, not to mention the giant bear facing it. The giant bear walked around the edge of the asphalt pit, roaring at the few people inside. Every time it chased a person or beast, it would run into the pit. This made it very angry, but there was nothing it could do. It could only walk around the edge to demonstrate its power. These guys who broke into its territory and dared to eat its food, they should be bitten to death. After walking for a while, the giant bear felt bored. When it was about to leave, a cave lion appeared. Although the cave lion was small in size, it could not erase its disgust for cave lions. The cave lion was the one who robbed its food the most, and all cave lions should die. The giant bear roared and rushed over, but unexpectedly, the cave lion also ran into the asphalt pit and did not sink in, just like the big mouth bird before. Roar! The giant bear stood up, hoping that its roar could frighten them, and at the same time, overlook these scums who only knew how to escape. Every time the hunting team was chased to this place, the giant bear would stand up and show its power, roaring as if it wanted to shake the entire forest to pieces. Not only that, Lei, Mao and Moer also walked in from another path, standing in the asphalt pit, and threw stones at the giant bear. These stones could not hurt the giant bear, but could increase its anger. Cha-Cha also joined in, and several of them attracted the giant bear's attention to the front or the top. While the giant bear was roaring at the several beasts in the asphalt pit, a figure quietly appeared behind the giant bear, and was getting closer and closer. When it was close to a certain distance, it suddenly accelerated and rushed to the giant bear. The angry giant bear did not expect that there would be such a brave one behind it. It was used to roaring at the prey hiding in the asphalt pit, but this time, it was defeated. The roar of the beasts had covered some of the sounds. When it felt the ground shaking and knew that something was rushing to it, it only had time to turn around, and was hit in the stomach. Even so, it still waved its paw. Four Fangs was hit by the bear's paw, and rolled on the ground several times. When the giant bear focused on Four Fangs and tried to stabilize its balance, a gray figure flashed by. It was hit again. This time, it was close to its chest, and the strength was stronger than before. Roar! Another roar rang out. This time, it was filled with unease and fear. It knew where it fell, and what would happen to the beasts and ferocious beasts in the forest if they entered here. Bang! The giant figure fell into the asphalt pit, splashing a lot of sticky asphalt. Seeing the giant bear fall into the asphalt pit, everyone breathed a sigh of relief. Mao ran out to check Four Fangs' physical condition. Four Fangs was hit by the bear's paw, and there were several deep claw marks on its body. But for Four Fangs with rough skin and thick flesh, this injury was not too serious. It's not a big deal, just go back and rest. The claw marks are not deep. Mai looked and said. Four Fangs was still a little dizzy, lying on the ground and groaning. As the strongest among the beasts, it had never been hit like this in its life. Seeing that they were not seriously injured, and then looking at the giant bear that fell into the asphalt pit, everyone was still frightened. Fortunately, Caesar had patched it later, or the giant bear might not have been hit into the asphalt pit, and Four Fangs might have been killed by the giant bear's claws. They took the straw rope, and if Four Fangs accidentally fell into the asphalt pit, they would use the straw rope to save it. But unexpectedly, the giant bear seemed to be heavy, but its reaction was much more flexible than they thought. This made them understand that sometimes, the plan was only the ideal state, and anything unexpected could happen. Be more cautious when making plans in the future. Xiao Xian said. Yes. They all agreed. Seeing the giant bear gradually sinking, Mai asked everyone to leave, because it was useless to stay here. Chapter 136. After the first cooperation, the next few hunts went much smoother. At the same time, these young warriors became more cautious. Xiao Xian didn't join them. Sometimes, he even let Caesar go with them. He didn't give Caesar more instructions. You don't care about Caesar anymore? Lang Jie was very curious. Since the giant bear, Xiao Xian had let Caesar move freely for several hunts. I'm training it to be independent. Caesar is very smart. Sometimes, it can even help Yang Guang and the others. Xiao Xian said. Didn't you always tell them to be dependent on each other? Why are you talking about independence now? The specific situation needs to be analyzed. Different methods have to be used at different times. Xiao Xian answered. Since he couldn't understand, Lang Jie decided to stop thinking about it. He went to see what the other beasts were hunting. Xiao Xian stood on a tree and looked at a small stream in front of the tree. There were falling leaves and some broken twigs on the stream. The ancient people thought the fallen leaves were boats, and when they saw the black wood floating on it, they knew it was a boat. In fact, a boat was not as hard to make as Xiao Xian thought. A tree was enough. In the forest, there were many thick trees. A section of the tree trunk could be made into a canoe. However, the material of the tree still needed to be checked. The appearance of these beasts in the forest didn't attract the attention of the high-level ferocious beasts in their own territories. For them, these were just a few small beasts. They didn't care about them. Mai led the hunting team and these beasts from the first stronghold to the third. Although there were many small troubles along the way, the overall journey was quite smooth. For the members of the hunting group, this was also a novel hunting trip. Jiao, an eagle's cry came from the sky. Xiao Xian looked up. Cha-Cha wanted to fly to another place. When they arrived at the hunting ground of the third stronghold, 2/3 of the hunting time had passed. The hunting team wouldn't go far. Moreover, if they went further, they wouldn't be familiar with the terrain and species composition. Therefore, under normal circumstances, they would stay here for a few days, and then turn around and go back. However, Cha-Cha seemed to want to keep flying forward. If it weren't for Xiao Xian, it would have flown away long ago. In the sky, Cha-Cha had already told Xiao Xian with its unique flight path that it wanted to go there. Cha-Cha showed its strong desire to go in that direction when it came to the third stronghold. Uncle Mai, do you know where it is? Xiao Xian asked, pointing at the direction Cha-Cha wanted to fly to. Mai thought for a while and shook his head. I think I heard the old warriors mention it a long time ago. I can't remember. I only know that it's not a place we can go. I think it's called the Severing Land. Cha-Cha Land? Yes. Mai answered vaguely. He really couldn't remember. But when he was young, he heard other old warriors talking about it, saying that they couldn't go there. Since the ancestors stopped here and didn't go further, they must have their reasons. Out of their complete trust in their ancestors, every leader of the hunting group would not go any further after they arrived at this place. Even if they wanted to expand, they wouldn't go in that direction. Don't go there. Mai stared at Xiao Xian. He needed Xiao Xian's promise. After a pause, Xiao Xian nodded. Okay, I know. I won't go there. Mai finally smiled when he heard Xiao Xian's promise. He looked at the sky and waved to Xiao Xian, time to go back. Xiao Xian whistled, and then made a gesture to Cha-Cha in the sky. Jiao, Cha-Cha screamed unwillingly. It flew around the same place for a few more times, and then followed Xiao Xian back to the cave of the third stronghold. Because of its bad mood, it fought with an unknown bird on the way back. Unfortunately, the bird was more skillful. It only suffered a few scratches from Cha-Cha, while Cha-Cha was not only injured, but also bald. Mai felt even worse. Xiao Xian comforted it while applying medicine to Cha-Cha. When we go back, I'll ask the shaman what's over there. If it's okay, I'll take you there. As the return day was approaching, the hunters began to feel anxious. Although they felt that their beasts did a good job this time, they didn't fight, didn't cause any trouble to the hunting team, and even helped them to hunt a lot of prey. However, in the end, the only thing that was presented to the shaman was the animal skin roll in Xiao Xian's hand. Especially Lei, he had a conflict with Xiao Xian before, so he was worried that Xiao Xian would hold a grudge against him. Thinking of what other people did when he was angry, Lei dragged out a ferocious beast. This ferocious beast's level was not high, but it was the only ferocious beast that he and Meng had caught. In Meng's current situation, he could only catch wild beasts by himself. Xiao Xian looked at the prey in front of him and didn't know what to say for a long time. Was this blatant bribery? He had a lot of thoughts. Not only Lei, but the others also dragged their prey to Xiao Xian when they saw what Lei did. Guang's forest raccoons walked to Xiao Xian, shook its neck twice, and then lowered its head and spat out a piece of undigested bone in front of Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian, seeing that Xiao Xian's expression was not very good, Yang Guang and his sister hurried to pull the forest raccoons away. Xiao Xian didn't record these bribes in the animal skin roll, but when he returned to the tribe and reported to the shaman, he said that these beasts were the reward for this trip. The shaman didn't care about this. He took the animal skin roll handed to him by Xiao Xian and studied it for 3 days. Lei, Mao, Yang Guang and his sister didn't know that Xiao Xian also recorded some pictures in the form of Wu roll when he was recording. And these pictures were the scenes of these beasts hunting prey with their unique hunting methods. The advantages and disadvantages, as well as the temperament of these beasts, could be clearly seen from the recorded words and the shaman's drawings. Xiao Xian didn't need to say much. After the first time, the shaman didn't make a decision immediately. Later, the shaman arranged several times to let these beasts stay in the same hunting group, but they didn't stay in Mai's hunting group, but changed their hunting routes one by one. Xiao Xian also followed the shaman's instructions one by one. He was lucky enough to walk around the hunting routes of other hunting groups, and had a general understanding of the distribution of species on each hunting group's hunting routes. After each hunting trip, Xiao Xian also drew a more specific map. On this map, roughly where there were wild beasts, ferocious beasts, where there were more herbs, where there were huge trees, etc., were all marked. Xiao Xian didn't tell anyone except the shaman, even old Ku didn't know. Several times when Xiao Xian went to other hunting groups, he took Caesar and Cha-Cha with him. After following the hunting routes of other hunting groups to the third location, Cha-Cha showed a strong yearning for a certain direction again, and wanted to fly in that direction. But for the other times, it didn't do so. Xiao Xian asked the shaman why this happened, but the shaman didn't give a definite answer. He said that he would read the Wu roll records left by his ancestors to see if there were any detailed records. Before the situation was clear, Xiao Xian wouldn't take Cha-Cha to that place easily. Who knew what would be there? Could they come back safely? Because the shaman had talked with Lei and Mao, who had raised wild beasts, they tried their best to hunt as much food as possible before the winter. This winter, the shaman engraved the beasts one by one, except for Caesar and Cha-Cha. During the engraving process, the shaman called Xiao Xian over, and planned to let Xiao Xian do it if he couldn't hold on. Guizhe, as the next shaman, was also called over to watch. The engraving site was right next to the fire pit. In order to ensure enough spiritual power during the engraving process, Xiao Xian was responsible for throwing fire crystals into the fire pit. It was snowing heavily, but there was no snowflake around, not even a drop of melted rain. Compared to other places on the mountain, the fire pit next to the fire pit was like a big heater. Xiao Xian threw a fire crystal into the fire pit, and watched the red energy floating towards the shaman and himself. As for Guizhe, she hadn't awakened, so she couldn't absorb the energy of the fire crystal. Let's start, the shaman said. The first one to be brought over was Lei's beast named Meng. The people who brought Meng left quickly, and Lei couldn't stay here, so they waited in another stone house. At the top of the mountain, there were only the shaman, Xiao Xian, and Guizhe by the fire pit. The shaman sat on the animal skin blanket, looking at the wild beast that was a little taller than him, and reached out his hand. The familiar two-horned flame totem appeared in the shaman's palm, and the blue totem gradually took shape, but it took longer than Xiao Xian. When the totem was completely formed, the shaman was sweating profusely. Fortunately, the energy of the fire crystal could be replenished quickly. This time, the shaman didn't have to guard against the surrounding dangers like Xiao Xian did that night. He was very safe here. The process was similar to what Xiao Xian did, but after the totem was formed, it took longer to imprint it. Fortunately, the totem didn't disperse when the last bit was imprinted, and this step was completed. At the moment when the totem was completed, the shaman was exhausted and fell down. If Xiao Xian didn't react quickly and caught him, the shaman would have fallen directly on the stone beside the fire pit. After the first totem, the shaman found that he could only hold on to one totem. It would take a longer time to imprint all 7 beasts. After one totem, he had to rest for a few days before he could imprint the next one. When the last totem was imprinted, almost half of the winter had passed. According to the ancient scroll, the success rate of imprinting the accompanying hunting dogs was only half. The shaman was prepared, but he didn't expect that all 7 beasts would be successfully imprinted. Although there were 4 times when the totem was almost scattered, it quickly condensed in the end and the totem was imprinted. The 7 beasts were also in good condition. In one winter, the 7 beasts imprinted by the shaman all grew up. However, they didn't change as much as Caesar did. Just like what was recorded in the animal skin scroll passed down by the ancestors, after the totem was imprinted, it was a gradual process that was relatively slow. At the same time, compared to the 7 beasts who were getting better and better, Cha-Cha was listless all day long. For Cha-Cha, who was usually full of energy, this was a very rare situation. Was it because it was the only exception among the 9 beasts in the tribe? However, the shaman said that Cha-Cha couldn't imprint. It wasn't that he didn't want to, but that he couldn't. Xiao Xian tried once, but he couldn't do it. The shaman also said that Cha-Cha was a real giant mountain eagle, and giant mountain eagles had their own beliefs. Chapter 137. In the winter, the 7 beasts that had been successfully engraved by the shaman had gradually begun to change their shape and appearance. Although the shaman had reminded them to prepare more food before the winter, the 7 beasts had grown up and their appetites had become bigger. The food still could not satisfy them. After all, with the increase of their level, the energy they needed would also change. It was just like the intermediate and senior totem warriors were not interested in the meat of ordinary beasts, because the meat could not satisfy their hunger. Until the end of the winter, each of the beasts looked like Caesar when he had just been engraved. The originally fat beasts had become very skinny. Even the fat on Sia's body was worn down. After the winter, as in previous years, it was the most important sacrificial ceremony in the whole tribe. According to the records passed down by the ancestors, the beasts that had been successfully engraved could participate in the sacrificial ceremony, and the fire would no longer reject them. Therefore, on the day of the sacrificial ceremony, except for Cha-Cha, the other 8 beasts were brought to the top of the mountain and stood beside the fire pit. Participating in the sacrificial ceremony meant that they had officially become members of the tribe. This was a very strange scene. It could even be said that this was the only time in hundreds of years that people and accompanying beasts had participated in the sacrificial ceremony together. Everyone was very excited, because they were luckier than the ancestors to be able to witness such a scene with their own eyes. After the ceremony, the shaman recorded it in detail in the form of Wu roll. This was also one of his great achievements since he became the shaman. It was something that could be passed down from generation to generation. It was worth remembering. In contrast, Cha-Cha, who was left at home and needed to avoid the fire of the fire, looked more bleak. Although its appetite was not reduced, its spirit was not as good as before. After the sacrificial ceremony, the coldness of winter gradually disappeared. From the top of the mountain to the bottom of the mountain, it became lively. A few days before the first hunting, several beasts that had been engraved would often go down the mountain for a walk. When they were young, they were often bullied by Cha-Cha. Except for the falcon in Gigu's hand and the turtle in Guizei's place, all of them were caught by Cha-Cha several times in the air. Now that they had become ferocious beasts or were close to becoming ferocious beasts, they were naturally not afraid of the Cha-Cha. If not for the fact that the Cha-Cha could fly, they would have probably retaliated. Fortunately, Caesar protected her and did not allow those few to tease the Cha-Cha. It was reasonable to say that Caesar was completely inferior to the others when they were all wild beasts. Even in the large wolf species, they were a relatively weak subgroup and were not as fierce as the others. But in fact, after the engraving was completed and he grew into a ferocious beast, Caesar's growth was much better than that of the other 7. Neither the cave lion Chi nor Mao dared to provoke Caesar. Cha-Cha continued to squat in its nest as it watched the minions that it had once bullied become stronger one by one. Seeing this situation, Xiao Xian was helpless. When the shaman had almost finished teaching this batch of newly awakened warriors, Xiao Xian went up the mountain again to have a good chat with the shaman. I plan to take Cha-Cha to have a look over there during this hunting trip. Xiao Xian sat opposite the shaman and said. The shaman understood what Xiao Xian meant by over there, so he remained silent. After a while, he went to the inner room and took out an animal skin roll. He handed it to Xiao Xian and said, "This is recorded in the ancient scroll left by our ancestors." After Xiao Xian told the shaman about Cha-Cha last year, the shaman carefully read the ancient scroll and extracted some relevant records. Xiao Xian took the animal skin roll and looked at the written records. These were only ordinary written records, and obviously, they were retold by others. The description was a little vague. It also mentioned the severing land that Mai had mentioned. When the ancestors opened up the hunting route, they were blocked by a thorny plant and could not go any further. However, when they stood at a high place, they could vaguely see the mountains in the distance, but because of the plant in the middle, they could not go any further. Therefore, the ancestors called that place the severing land. It cut off the road between the mountains and prevented anyone from entering. However, there were also some interesting things mentioned in the scroll. The shaman said that Cha-Cha was a giant mountain eagle, and the giant mountain eagles had their own belief and source of power. Xiao Xian did not know much about it before, so this animal skin roll had some information. It was said that the giant mountain eagle's power came from the snow abyss. It was a huge mountain covered in ice and snow all year round, so people called it the Eagle Mountain. Chief Ao once said that the giant mountain eagles came from the Eagle Mountain, but now it seemed that it was not true. The Eagle Mountain was the source of their power. As for whether it was the place where they were born, no one knew. A long time ago, the ancestors had only heard about the legends of the giant mountain eagles, but had never seen them with their own eyes. Some people said that the Eagle Mountain was the eagle's graveyard, while others said that the Eagle Mountain was the eagle's birthplace. There was not much information on the animal skin roll, so Xiao Xian finished reading it quickly. Is the place where Cha-Cha wants to go to the Eagle Mountain? Xiao Xian was puzzled. Maybe. The shaman said. After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian said, I still want to go with it. The shaman looked at Xiao Xian and was silent for a while. Then he said, it's very dangerous. You may not be able to come back. I know. Xiao Xian had made up his mind, so he would not change it. I'll have to trouble you to talk to Uncle Mai. The shaman did not try to persuade him again. He just sighed. Knowing that the shaman agreed with his decision, Xiao Xian grinned and bowed. Don't worry, I'll come back safely. The shaman felt his eyelids twitch. He waved his hand helplessly and signaled Xiao Xian to go out. It was the first hunt of the year, and there were several ferocious beasts in the team. Whether it was Ta or the 5 team leaders, they all wanted to perform well. Mai was excitedly discussing the upcoming hunt with Qiao when he heard the news brought by Xiao Xian. You want to go to the Severing Land? Mai's facial muscles twitched, and he said it word by word. He took a few deep breaths and clenched his fists. He wanted to beat up the person in front of him. He knew that Xiao Xian was not a person who would give up easily. Last year's promise was nothing. This time, he directly asked the shaman for help, and the shaman agreed. What else could they say? No, it should be the mountain range on the other side of the Severing Land. It could be somewhere else. I just want to have a look and see why Cha-Cha always wants to go there. Xiao Xian explained. It would have been better if he did not explain. Once he explained, Qiao Mai and his wife became more worried. They admired the warrior's fearless spirit, but it did not mean that they liked to see such suicidal things. Even their ancestors did not want to go there. How could Xiao Xian, who was not even a mid-level totem warrior, come back. How annoying. How annoying. However, this matter was not made public. It was not until the hunting group went out from the first hunting area to the third hunting area that they knew about it. The Severing Land? You can't go there. Xian, listen to my. Don't go there. You can't come back if you go there. Really, don't go there. If Cha-Cha really wants to go there, he can just fly there himself. Why do you have to follow him? Everyone in the hunting group tried to persuade Xiao Xian. After years of living together, they had become closer to Xiao Xian. They also thought highly of Xiao Xian, a new warrior. What was more, Xiao Xian was born in a cave near the mountain foot area, but he was not inferior to those people in the mountain. This made them feel proud and proud. In the eyes of many old warriors in the mountain foot area, Xiao Xian's future achievements would not be inferior to those people in the mountain. In the future, he might even live in the mountain. Many of them often used Xiao Xian to encourage their children. For example, Sai's father. Every time he saw that Sai was not doing well, he would use Xiao Xian to criticize him. So, until now, Sai had never looked at Xiao Xian in a good way. But now, Xiao Xian wanted to go to the place that even their ancestors did not want to go. Wasn't he looking for death? Unfortunately, persuasion was useless. How could the shaman agree? No one could understand. But since the shaman agreed, they did not insist on persuading him. Mai called Xiao Xian alone to talk, and gave some good stone spearheads to Xiao Xian. Uncle Mai, if I still don't come back in 6 days, don't wait for me. Xiao Xian said. Mai wanted to say something, but stopped. In the end, he nodded. Xiao Xian did not plan to take Caesar with him this time. He told old Ku about this matter. If he could come back, it would be fine. If not, old Ku still had Caesar to accompany him. The day before the hunting trip, Xiao Xian did not take Caesar with him. Instead, he left Caesar in the tribe. When Xiao Xian left, Caesar still followed him for some distance. After being scolded by Xiao Xian, Caesar reluctantly stopped. After saying goodbye to the hunting group, Xiao Xian called Cha-Cha. Then, holding Cha-Cha's feet, he was carried by Cha-Cha and left through the air. The forest ahead was not easy to pass, and the road was not easy to walk on. It was also time-consuming. But it was different in the air. There were not many large birds in the area ahead. When Cha-Cha stood on the ground, he was slightly taller than Xiao Xian's shoulder. Therefore, it was not too difficult for him to carry Xiao Xian. After flying through the forest, Xiao Xian found that there were fewer animals in the forest. Half a day later, Xiao Xian saw the Severing Land mentioned in the ancient scroll. It was an expanse of brambles that were the color of rust. Brambles that were thick like water tanks and brambles that were covered in hard thorns that were like the tips of blades interweaved together, causing one to shrink back at the sight of it. It was like a terrifying forest that practically obstructed everything. In the gaps of the thorns near the ground, there were some small but dangerous creatures. Their blood-red eyes were like evil spirits, staring at every creature that flew over the thorns. Even the ferocious beasts in other parts of the forest would not set foot here. Looking at the endless brambles in front of him, and then looking at the quickly flashing figures in the gaps of the brambles, Xiao Xian decided to take a rest first. He would wait for Cha-Cha to accumulate his strength before flying over. Chapter 138. Before they set off, Xiao Xian had brought some jerky with him, but Cha-Cha liked to eat fresh. After Cha-Cha caught some prey and ate to its heart's content, it took Xiao Xian to fly again. Occasionally, a large bird would fly past this area. A few times, it fought with Cha-Cha, and Xiao Xian almost fell from the sky. If Cha-Cha was a little bigger, Xiao Xian could still stand on its back. Unfortunately, Cha-Cha was still too small. Xiao Xian twisted his body to avoid the awl-like beak of the bird. With one hand holding Cha-Cha's claw, he quickly took out the prepared stone needles from the animal's skin pouch at his waist and threw them at the attacking birds. The stone needles had been dipped in a special grass juice, which had an extremely strong paralyzing effect. Xiao Xian always aimed at the parts of the body that the thick feathers of the attacking birds could not completely cover. As long as the skin was slightly broken, the medicine would seep in and take effect, and the birds would no longer chase after him. The birds that attacked Xiao Xian in front of him shook their heads and slowed down after being hit. They could not tell which direction they were flying in. However, this bird's resistance was probably not as strong as the ones before it. After being hit by the needle near its neck, it wobbled and flew up and down, then suddenly fell down. When it finally flapped its wings and stopped falling, it crashed into an arch bridge that was surrounded by thorns and thorns. Bang! The strong collision made the bird, which was already dizzy, even more dizzy. The thorns on the thorns also scraped off many of its feathers. The bird that was hit by the needle and hit the arch bridge was scratched by the thorns. Blood dripped down drop by drop. In the thorns, the creatures that smelled the blood immediately became excited. They nimbly passed through the crisscrossing thorns and ran towards the source of the blood. When Xiao Xian looked down from above, he saw the figures that quickly passed through the thorns from all directions, converging towards the bird that was still fluttering in the thorns. The creatures that swarmed over quickly surrounded the flying bird. They looked like monkeys, and their fur was the same color as the thorns. Most of them were only the size of 2 fists of an adult warrior, but they were very nimble. Even when they were in the thorns, they were very fast. The group of monkeys that lived in the thorns, densely packed, pounced on the bird and bit it. For a moment, Xiao Xian could only see a bloody mist exploding in that area. The blood splattered on the surrounding thorns. After it dried, it would probably be the same color as the thorns. Feathers floated in the bloody mist, one by one, and then slowly fell down. Some of the slower monkeys that could not squeeze in to enjoy the delicious meal wandered around the surroundings unwillingly. When they saw Cha-Cha flying in the sky, they screamed and waved their claws, as if they wanted to catch the bird in the sky. Not only Xiao Xian, even Cha-Cha, who had lowered his head to take a look, shivered. He seemed to have thought of the situation that he might encounter if he fell down. He flapped his wings vigorously, hoping to fly out of this place as soon as possible. "Don't let go, brother. If you let go, I'll die." Xiao Xian patted Cha-Cha's claws lightly. Screech, Cha-Cha responded and accelerated, flying towards the mountain range in the distance. Along the way, they encountered a few more birds. Fortunately, although the situation was dangerous, they safely flew over the thorns in the end. At dusk, the man and the bird finally landed on a tree. Both of them let out a long sigh of relief. No wonder the ancestors didn't want to get close to the severing land. Not to mention the tall, thick, and dense thorns, those monkeys could eat people quickly. Even a senior totem warrior could not fight against creatures that had a great advantage in numbers. Not to mention, this was only what Xiao Xian saw from the sky. Perhaps there were other creatures living in the thorns that had not been discovered yet. "You take a rest first. I'll be on guard." Xiao Xian patted Cha-Cha next to him and said in a low voice. Even if they passed through the thorns and came to this mountain range that looked no different from the hunting area, Xiao Xian could not let down his guard. Night came quietly. Xiao Xian couldn't find a cave nearby, so he could only find a place on top of a tree. He used the surrounding branches as camouflage, set up a small trap, and sprinkled some medicinal powder on the ground. He made do here for the night. The sounds in the forest could tell Xiao Xian if this place was the same as the hunting area. Listening carefully, the sounds made by different creatures mixed together to form a unique sound of the area. Therefore, as long as he listened to the sounds, he could make a preliminary judgment. Xiao Xian carefully distinguished these sounds. No, it was different. The nocturnal creatures here were very different from those in the hunting area. It seemed that he had to pay more attention. He could not judge based on his previous knowledge in the hunting area. Late at night, Xiao Xian was awakened by the sound of leaves rubbing against each other. Because he needed to be vigilant, he could not sleep deeply. This was a habit he had developed in the forest. He did not rest, but he could not rest at ease. He would wake up at the slightest abnormal sound. Listening carefully, the sound was like the wind blowing the branches full of dense leaves, and the leaves rustled. Rustle. But in fact, at this time, there was no wind at all. None of the leaves around Xiao Xian moved. The tree trunk under his feet trembled slightly, which meant that something had climbed up the tree. It was not on Xiao Xian's branch, but it was not far away. The rustling sound gradually became louder. Xiao Xian slightly comforted Cha-Cha, who was a little uneasy. Holding the hilt of the stone knife in his right hand, he held his breath and at the same time, he used his special vision to look outside. The branches were a little interfering, but Xiao Xian could still see through the leaves and see the situation outside. He looked in the direction of the sound. Was that a snake? Looking at its bones, it looked like a snake, but its outline was a little blurry. Its body surface was covered with many long, thin, and dense bone-like things. This was a creature that Xiao Xian had never seen before. He could only judge the creature that had climbed up the tree based on its general shape. The snake's body was much thicker than Xiao Xian's. It could easily swallow Xiao Xian in one bite, which gave Xiao Xian a bad feeling. Fortunately, it did not come to the branch where Xiao Xian and the others were. Instead, it went through the branches to another tree. When the strange snake was far away, the rustling sound also gradually faded away. Cha-Cha's anxiety also subsided. Xiao Xian tightened the stone knife in his hand and carefully exhaled. He did not know if this trip was worth it, but his adventurous nature from his previous life, coupled with Cha-Cha's yearning for a certain place, made Xiao Xian decide to make a trip. Perhaps there were more dangers ahead, but once he started, he could not turn back. Xiao Xian would also try his best to go as far as possible. Perhaps he would die and not be able to return to the tribe. There was enough food left in the tribe, and there was Caesar at Old Ku's side. His life would not be more difficult than Old Ku's former life as a stoneware craftsman. Thinking about it, Xiao Xian sneered in his heart. Would he die? How was that possible? Holding the knife, Xiao Xian closed his eyes and rested for a while. He had to continue tomorrow. At night, Xiao Xian woke up several times and saw several nocturnal animals. They were indeed different from the animals in the forest on the other side of the thorny belt. In the next few days, Xiao Xian quietly walked through the forest, while Cha-Cha flew by in the air. Xiao Xian only needed to follow Cha-Cha. It could determine the correct direction. This trip was to find the place Cha-Cha had been looking for, not to hunt. Apart from eating basic food when they were hungry, Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha would not do much fighting. They had to save more energy for the journey, and also be vigilant of the dangers around them. Where would they find the time and energy to hunt? Since Xiao Xian decided to bring Cha-Cha here, Cha-Cha was no longer lazy. It hunted fiercely every day, ate a lot, and hurried on with its journey. Many times, it even thought that Xiao Xian was too slow, so it grabbed Xiao Xian and flew up. After all, the road on the mountain was not as fast as flying. Sometimes, they would meet some big flying birds. Cha-Cha would first avoid them. If it could not avoid them, it would fight them. If it could not fight them, it would run away. If it could not escape from them, it would lead them down and ask Xiao Xian for help. Just like that, they walked for 6 days straight. At this time, the hunting group that stayed in the third location did not see Xiao Xian, so they had to go back first. Xiao Xian did not expect that the place Cha-Cha wanted to go would be so far away. He and Cha-Cha had been walking for more than 10 days, but it seemed that they had not seen the end. During these 10 days, Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha almost fell into the stomach of the strange ferocious beasts in the forest several times. Both of them had many injuries. When they were seriously injured, they would find a cave and rest for 2 days. They could not rush at this time. They had to rest well and maintain a good state, so that they could continue to move forward. Sneaking in this dangerous forest made Xiao Xian more sensitive to danger. At the same time, he became more skilled in hiding himself and his breath. Holding the scarred teeth knife, Xiao Xian moved his arm. His arm was broken when he dodged the saber-toothed beast, but it was not a big deal. He would feel better after a night's rest. The stone knives that he had brought with him were all broken. Xiao Xian had made some rough stone knives on the way, but they were all broken in the fight with the ferocious beasts. Now, the only thing he had left was old Ku's teeth knife. But judging from the condition of the teeth knife, it would not last long. In front of them, there was a cliff about 100 meters high. Without Xiao Xian's signal, Cha-Cha had already flown down. Xiao Xian put the teeth knife into the animal skin bag around his waist, and grabbed Cha-Cha's claw with his other uninjured arm. Cha-Cha flew down the cliff with Xiao Xian. In front of them, there was still a huge forest with no end in sight. But the trees in this forest seemed to be taller than the ones they had seen before. After flying for a while, Xiao Xian asked Cha-Cha to find a place to put him down. Cha-Cha did not respond. There were no birds around, so there were no threats. They could continue to fly. It felt that it was faster to fly. All right, then fly a little higher. I keep having the feeling that this place. Before Xiao Xian finished his words, a branch that stretched out from the top of a giant tree suddenly bent, and then shot out like a spring towards Cha-Cha, who was about to fly over. At the moment when the branch shot out, the branches and leaves on its body quickly contracted. The leaves closed and stuck to the branch, and the branch fell down and stuck to its body like scales. It was a snake. And this strange snake reminded Xiao Xian of the creatures he had encountered on the night when he first entered this mountain. Chapter 139. Be careful. Xiao Xian hurriedly shouted. The giant snake's body shot forward like a spring. The friction between its body in the air was like a strong wind, not giving Cha-Cha enough time to react. The distance of 10 meters was covered in the blink of an eye. Xiao Xian wanted to help, but they were in the air and his mobility was limited. He could only warn Cha-Cha. Unfortunately, it was too late. Cha-Cha heard Xiao Xian's words and wanted to fly higher, but something unexpected happened. He wanted to avoid it, but he was too late. The giant snake that shot forward bit Cha-Cha's wing. It was fine to fly with Xiao Xian in the air, but with the addition of the giant snake, Cha-Cha could only be dragged down. Screech Cha-Cha let out a long hiss unwillingly, and his body fell rapidly with the force. The giant snake carried Cha-Cha and landed on a tree, then fell down from the tree. Through layers of branches, they slowed down, and finally landed on the ground covered in thick grass. It seemed that the giant snake was already familiar with this, as it did not worry about the danger of falling to its death. The branches that blocked its fall only slowed it down, but did not hurt it at all. Its skin would give it enough protection. The giant snake bit Cha-Cha's wing, and its body quickly wrapped around Cha-Cha. Prey must be strangled to death before eating. Screech Cha-Cha wanted to break free, but found that he could not loosen the snake's grip. Every time he struggled, the snake's body would tighten. This made Cha-Cha even more uncomfortable, and he could not even make a sound. After a while, he would not even be able to breathe. Xiao Xian, who was being held by Cha-Cha, let go of Cha-Cha's claws when the giant snake coiled around him. Without thinking, he took out his teeth knife and slashed down with all his might. With a bang, the knife landed heavily on the giant snake's body. Crack, crack. The sound of a tree branch being chopped and broken reverberated through the forest. Some of the fragments on the snake's tough and thick skin were sent flying by the slash. This was the knife Xiao Xian usually used when he hunted ferocious beasts in the hunting area. If the prey's skin was tough, he would quickly follow up with another knife. Using his full strength, he slashed continuously in one breath. Moreover, every slash was aimed at the same spot at the same time. Even if the beast's skin was tough, as long as the saber was still there, and the saber was still hard, he could break open a hole in this tough defense. The tree-like camouflage was the snake's specialized scales. Compared to ordinary branches, the snake's specialized scales were harder. Even Xiao Xian's teeth blade could only leave a mark on the scales. It was difficult to cut a wound in one go. Indeed, Xiao Xian had been injured before, so the strength of his slashes was weakened. He could not injure the snake with one strike. However, the snake's skin was harder to deal with than the thorn-black wind's hard thorns. It was also a huge problem for Xiao Xian. However, if one strike was not enough, he would try again. If 2 strikes were not enough, he would try again. The teeth knife kept slashing, and the hard fragments of the snake's skin were sent flying. It was very painful. Like the fragments of an explosion, they scattered in all directions. He could not stop. He could not give the beast enough time to react. What's more, Cha-Cha was still caught by the snake. Xiao Xian needed to solve this problem as soon as possible. The longer he delayed, the closer Cha-Cha would be to death. Crack. 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 There were 3 crisp slashes in a row, and the fragments of the snake's hard skin splashed. Along with the slashes, the weird snake's unique roar was heard. It was like the shrill sound of a storm blowing through a narrow gap. Slash. 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 Xiao Xian had no time to care about the discomfort in his eardrum. He only focused on cutting the wound on the snake's body with his teeth knife. Every time he cut, the snake's thick and solid leather armor would crack deeper. The snake sensed Xiao Xian's intention and became angry. The specialized scales, which had shrunk, grew like leaves in spring. Except for the part where Cha-Cha was curled, the specialized scales on the other parts of the snake were erected and the leaves were completely unfolded. The whole snake was like a blooming flower on a stick. Its body, which was not small in the first place, suddenly expanded to twice its original size. On the strange snake face Xiao Xian had never seen before, a pair of cold eyes stared at Xiao Xian. Its brown forked tongue, which was like a tree branch, came out of its mouth. It twisted its thick body and swung its tail at Xiao Xian mercilessly. Xiao Xian had to temporarily stop slashing. He bent his knees and his body swayed slightly. His feet stomped heavily on the ground, and the plants under his feet instantly turned into a puddle of green mud. His figure bounced back to avoid the snake's powerful tail. After landing on the ground, he quickly jumped up and down a few times. Every time he touched the ground, his feet stomped hard, leaving deep marks on the ground. His figure was like the wind, quickly changing his position to avoid being caught by the snake. Then, without taking a breath, he swung his teeth knife and slashed at the same spot where he had slashed several times just now. Don't think that I can't see the scars on your branches just because you've bloomed. Slash. The branches and leaves that had exploded to block the opening were cut off by this slash. The blade did not stop and accurately chopped at the opening left by the previous slashes. It was another round of continuous slashes, not giving the snake any time to breathe. Even if the teeth knife was not sharp enough, it still posed a great threat to the snake this time. Poochie. Strange brownish-green blood spurted out from the wound. Even if it had a tough outer armor, the pain of flesh wounds and bleeding could not be avoided, even for a ferocious beast. After all, it was not a body of steel. The thick, tough leather armor had already been damaged, and the wound was still deepening. If the snake did not stop it, it would be directly cut in half. Feeling the pain on its body, the snake was angry and screamed again and again. Its original target was the eagle that flew past. It liked to eat this kind of small eagle the most. As for the creature caught by the eagle, it thought that it was prey caught by the eagle and did not take it seriously at all. It could not understand why this seemingly weak creature in front of it could pose such a threat to it. Its skin was broken, and blood was flowing out. This was something that it had never expected. If it could, it would have thrown this seemingly weak creature far away when it caught the eagle. Unfortunately, regret was useless. The serpent twisted its body. It was dodging to avoid being attacked again in its wounds. However, Xiao Xian's figure was agile. Not only did he avoid its attack, but he also pressed on. Slash again. Again. The blade flashed continuously. The wound on the snake's body became bigger and bigger, and more brownish-green blood flowed out. In the end, the snake chose to give up on the prey in its hands. It retracted its branches and leaves, threw the eagle down, and dragged its injured body away quickly. From the moment the snake dragged Cha-Cha to the moment it was forced back by Xiao Xian, it had only been a minute. Xiao Xian was anxious about Cha-Cha's injury and did not give the snake any time to breathe. This was why he was able to finish it in such a short time. On the other hand, Xiao Xian exploded with more power than usual in a short time. Looking at the snake's escaping figure, Xiao Xian panted and did not chase after it. After the snake threw Cha-Cha down, he quickly ran over to check on Cha-Cha's injuries. Cha-Cha's wings were injured, and there were some fractures. It could only flap weakly a few times and would not be able to fly for a while. Looking at the places where Cha-Cha had been bitten by the snake, there were no traces of venomous fangs, and the wounds did not seem to be highly toxic. Xiao Xian breathed a sigh of relief. Fortunately, there was no poison. After solving the problem just now, Xiao Xian thought to find a safe place to hide with Cha-Cha to recuperate. When the man and eagle recovered, they would fly over in the air. This place was probably much safer in the air. Of course, they had to fly high. They could not give these strange snakes a chance. The snake just now was not the one Xiao Xian encountered that night. Therefore, there were many snakes like this in this forest. No wonder they did not see any other birds in the sky when they flew over. They probably all entered the stomach of these strange snakes. As he was thinking, Xiao Xian's movements became sluggish. Even Cha-Cha, who was flapping its wings in frustration, stopped. Hiss, 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 above his head, that familiar sound was heard again. Cold sweat dripped from Xiao Xian's forehead. All the muscles in his body were tense. In that short minute just now, Xiao Xian had almost exhausted all his strength. He was still in a state of exhaustion. Before coming over, he had already gone through a battle and injured his arm. Just now, he had gone through another battle. He thought that he would have a buffer, but he did not expect that this forest would not give him enough time to catch his breath. Xiao Xian turned around, his back facing Cha-Cha. He raised his head and looked in the direction of the sound. In the forest of giant trees, looking up from the ground, the lush branches and leaves were all that could be seen, covering the sky and the sun. It was as if the little bits of sunlight that seeped through were charity. As for the place where the giant snake had dragged Cha-Cha down, because of the broken branches along the way, more yang guang leaked down. Combined with the surrounding environment, it was like an abrupt light pillar, extremely eye-catching. At this moment, Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha were standing in this light pillar. The yang guang illuminated this place, making it much warmer than other places in the forest. If it was in the tribe, being exposed to this kind of yang guang would not be enjoyable. When it was peaceful and warm, it would almost make people close their eyes in comfort. However, at this moment, whether it was Xiao Xian or Cha-Cha, they could not feel this kind of warmth. On the contrary, they only felt that they were in the coldest winter snow. In the distance, in the dark forest, there were no other living creatures, not even flying insects. Above them, two thick branches became bent and then slid down along the trunk. Bang! A slight and short muffled sound, the same as the one Xiao Xian heard in the air. The two giant snakes had already put away the specialized scales that were used as camouflage. They slowly moved towards Xiao Xian, as if they were not worried that their prey would escape. With one in front and one behind, Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha were sandwiched in the middle. Thump thump. Thump thump. Xiao Xian listened to his thundering heartbeat, his palms sweating. His grip on the stone knife did not tremble. Xiao Xian's mind raced as he tried to think of a solution. He knew that he did not have much strength left. If he had to fight one more time, he would not have much chance of winning. Even if he risked his life to fight one more time, there would still be some hope. However, there were now two of them, and these two were not smaller than the one he had just cut off. Chapter 140. Even without their specialized scales, the two snakes were still much thicker than Xiao Xian. They slowly approached Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha. Strangely, Xiao Xian saw a trace of mockery in their cold eyes. They had seen Xiao Xian defeat their own kind, but did not help. Instead, they watched from high up on the branches, as if they were using their own kind to test Xiao Xian's strength. Now, they realized that Xiao Xian did not have enough strength to pose a threat to them. Beside him was a delicious little eagle. Finally, they slowly came down from the tree. The two snakes twisted their bodies and walked in an S shape, getting closer and closer. Just as Xiao Xian was thinking about whether to fight one more time or carry Cha-Cha and escape, a sharp eagle cry came from the sky. This cry broke the silence of the forest, and also disturbed the originally slow pace of the two snakes. The two snakes flicked their tongues, as if sensing something. However, they did not approach Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha. Xiao Xian's heart beat faster. There were eagles. Eagles and snakes were also on opposite sides here. Either you eat me, or I swallow you. Naturally, the two snakes would not be small characters like him and Cha-Cha if they were able to make them wary. Weak creatures would not be able to survive in this forest. Cha-Cha turned its head and looked away from the two snakes to the sky. Whoosh! A huge figure flashed past above them. The two snakes seemed to have the intention to leave, but were hesitating. Just as they were hesitating, the huge figure flew over again. This time, it did not just fly past them, but directly passed through the dense branches above them. Two large claws tore through the dense branches, revealing an eagle head similar to Cha-Cha's. Is this also a giant mountain eagle? Xiao Xian thought. Compared to the giant mountain eagle, Cha-Cha looked like a toddler in kindergarten. The giant eagle's sharp eyes looked at the two snakes on the ground and swooped down. Crack, 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 crack. The branches above them became brittle and broke into countless pieces. Wooden splinters fell like rain. Xiao Xian carried Cha-Cha and quickly ran to the side to hide. He did not dare to run away. Here, he could rely on the giant eagle to avoid the two snakes. If he ran away, there might be more of these snakes in other places. It was better to stay here and observe the situation. The giant eagle swooped down through the branches. When its large claws clawed on the tree trunks, 10 people would not be able to encircle them, leaving holes. When it was a few meters above the ground, the eagle claw exerted force and rushed toward one of the large snakes. The area under the forest was still a little narrow for it. It couldn't even stretch its wings, and its agility was greatly reduced. Even so, the eagle's claws still caused a great impact to the snake. The eagle's claws pressed down on the snake's wriggling body. The eagle's sharp beak pecked at the snake like a sharp blade. The other snake wanted to help, but the eagle whipped its wing and only bit off a few feathers. The eagle was supposed to hunt in a wide area, not in a dense forest. If it did not do well, it would be trapped. Moreover, the eagle's wings could be scratched by the branches. Even if the eagle's wings were tougher than those of ordinary birds, it was not completely unaffected. Xiao Xian did not dare to help rashly. If Xiao Xian went over, the giant eagle would be restrained. The giant eagle grabbed the big snake that had been pecked by it and flung it towards the thick tree trunk next to it with great force. At the same time, when the other snake tried to bite it, it used the snake under its claws as a whip and lashed at it. Bang! The snake's head hit the tree trunk again and again. Every time it hit the tree trunk, it would leave a hole. Xiao Xian watched from the side with his mouth wide open. This eagle was indeed an expert. Looking at the way it used the snake's body as a whip, it was obvious that it was not its first time. It was very skilled. It was the first time he saw an eagle use a snake as a whip. It seemed that this giant eagle understood where its weakness was and used a more relaxed method to deal with its prey. Cha-Cha, who was next to Xiao Xian, was also stunned. However, it soon became excited and wanted to grab the snake and swing it a few times. Finally, the snake under the eagle's claws was knocked dizzy. It did not have a chance to bite the eagle's claws before it was torn apart by the eagle's beak. The thick and solid skin had already been broken in several places. Brownish-green blood flowed everywhere. Every time the eagle's beak tore the snake's skin, a piece of skin and flesh would fall off. The other snake wanted to escape, but the giant eagle dropped the snake under its claws and grabbed at the escaping snake. In the end, neither of the snakes managed to escape. The giant eagle bit and tore the two snakes, then raised its claws and threw one of them towards Xiaoxian and Cha-Cha. It grabbed the other snake and flapped its wings. It seemed that it wanted to leave this place and find a place to eat. The snake that was thrown over was obviously the giant eagle's charity. However, how could Xiaoxian give up the opportunity to leave this place for a snake? Xiaoxian stored his teeth knife back at his waist and ran over with Cha-Cha. He could see that the giant eagle did not want to kill Cha-Cha, but Xiaoxian still had to be cautious. After running a few steps, he slowed down and observed the eagle's reaction. The giant eagle, which was about to fly away, stopped and looked at Xiaoxian. Its sharp eyes made Xiaoxian break out in a cold sweat and feel great pressure. Cha-Cha, who was being carried on Xiaoxian's shoulder, was also doing his best at this time. He cried pitifully at the giant eagle, which was worthy of his usual cleverness and cheekiness. The giant eagle stared at Xiaoxian, who was getting closer and closer. It seemed to be thinking about something, and its sharp eyes were much less sharp. It flapped its wings and its claws vigorously pushed off the ground and flew up. Xiaoxian grabbed Cha-Cha's leg with one hand and jumped over. His legs clamped down on the snake's body, which had been pecked until only its spine was left. This was the only place that could be clamped down. As the giant eagle flew up, Xiaoxian clamped down on the snake's body and hung upside down. Brownish-green blood flowed all over Xiaoxian's body. Cha-Cha, who was being held by Xiaoxian, did not feel good either. It was rarely held upside down like this. Thanks to his strong body and the strength of a totem warrior in the tribe, Xiaoxian could carry Cha-Cha's weight with one arm. It was not difficult for him to carry big stones in the tribe. Although Cha-Cha was big now, it was much lighter than a stone. During the ascent, the giant eagle could not fly freely, so it had to use the trees nearby several times. Xiaoxian and Cha-Cha bumped into trees several times. He also felt the same as the snake just now. Xiaoxian tried his best not to throw Cha-Cha away. They did not expect to be able to sit on the eagle's back and give it a ride. This eagle had a good temper. It was not related to Cha-Cha by blood, so it did not show any affection. It was just a little friendly. Xiaoxian could not push it anymore. If he angered it, he and Cha-Cha might end up in the eagle's mouth. In the world of ferocious beasts, the same kind was nothing. They could still be eaten. After rushing out of the forest, it was much easier. Xiaoxian felt that even his breathing became easier. The giant eagle flew higher and higher, far away from the top of the forest. This was an experienced giant eagle, unlike Cha-Cha, who was a rookie. The scenery on the ground became smaller and smaller. Xiaoxian's field of vision also became wider. He could see the mountains in the distance and the green forest. Xiaoxian, who was brought high up in the sky, finally had time to observe the giant eagle. Xiaoxian did not notice it before, but now that he observed it carefully, he found that the giant eagle's condition was not as good as he had imagined. There were some fragments on its claws that were about to fall off. The toes on its claws were also broken in two places and were bleeding. This was caused by the fight with the two snakes just now. Looking at its flying posture, it was not as fast as before. The flapping of its wings was also a little clumsy, as if it was withstanding a great weight. In fact, Xiaoxian and Cha-Cha were nothing compared to this giant eagle. As for the snake, even if it was caught, it should not have been so heavy. This giant eagle seemed to be struggling to fly. Xiaoxian observed the giant eagle from its claws, to its feathers, to its beak. Because Xiaoxian often faced Cha-Cha, when he looked at this giant eagle that looked similar to Cha-Cha, he found that its beak was more curved than Cha-Cha's. This kind of beak was not good for pecking prey. Was it sick? Or was there another reason? It seemed to have a sharp aura, but its body was no longer sharp. A fight could bring it great pain. It was hard to imagine that such a powerful eagle in the forest would be in such a state. If he had not observed this, Xiao Xian would have thought that it was still healthy. As he pondered, Xiao Xian suddenly thought of a possibility. Could it be that this eagle was already old? He just did not know how old it was. How long would it take for Cha-Cha to grow to this size? A few decades? A few hundred years? Or even longer? The mountain range was getting closer and closer. Xiao Xian had never been here before. Moreover, the giant eagle was flying in the direction that Cha-Cha had flown to. Could it be that Eagle Mountain was over there? However, Xiao Xian did not see any other giant eagles here. If it was Eagle Mountain, why was there no eagle? It seemed that Eagle Mountain was not here, but somewhere even further away. Xiao Xian thought to himself. This place was only a temporary resting place for the giant eagle. As it approached the mountain, the giant eagle began to flap its wings vigorously to pull itself up. This time, the feeling of heaviness was even more obvious. Even if Cha-Cha was carrying Xiao Xian, it would not be so heavy. The giant eagle finally landed on the edge of a cliff, and the strange snake was thrown to the ground. Xiao Xian also jumped down from the strange snake and carried Cha-Cha to the side. Xiao Xian did not touch the snake. It was the giant eagle's prey. Most fearsome beasts had a strong sense of monopolization over their prey, and would fight to the death with anyone who tried to snatch it. Cha-Cha also did not go over, and quietly stayed at the side with Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian touched the animal skin bag on his body. There were 2 small pieces of jerky, and they were a little hard. He gave one to Cha-Cha and ate the other one himself. Cha-Cha looked at the jerky in Xiao Xian's hand and was a little hesitant. It did not like this kind of meat. However, in this place, it had no choice. It could only recover after eating something. Bang! A piece of bloody snake meat was thrown in front of Cha-Cha. Cha-Cha looked at the giant eagle that was still pecking at its food, and then looked at the fresh snake meat in front of it. It did not eat Xiao Xian's jerky. Xiao Xian retracted his hand and gnawed on the jerky while thinking. This giant eagle had a good heart. Were all old people like this? Chapter 141. After staying at the edge of the cliff for 2 days, Xiao Xian's body had almost recovered, and the injury on his arm had also recovered. However, Cha-Cha's recovery ability was not as strong as Xiao Xian's, so it took him more than 10 days to recover. What surprised Xiao Xian the most was that the giant eagle had also stayed at the cliff for 10 days. It did not have a nest here, and it was just a passerby. Every day, after eating its fill, it would stand on a high rock and rest. It had no intention of leaving immediately. And every day, it would share some of the prey with Cha-Cha. In these 10 days, Cha-Cha's tiredness was dispelled, and its mental state was greatly improved. These days, it did not have to worry about food at all. It just focused on recovering. Xiao Xian went down the mountain to hunt. Without Cha-Cha's help, it would be troublesome to go down the mountain. The giant eagle would not give Xiao Xian a ride. In addition to food, Xiao Xian also found some herbs and applied them on Cha-Cha's wounds. Originally, he wanted to see if the giant eagle needed help, but seeing that it was very resistant, Xiao Xian temporarily gave up the idea. When Cha-Cha could fly again, the giant eagle did not plan to stay. The giant eagle was going to take Cha-Cha in that direction. Xiao Xian did not know if he should follow, stay, or go back directly. With this giant eagle, Cha-Cha should be a lot safer. However, after Cha-Cha flew, it called out to Xiao Xian, indicating that Xiao Xian should hurry up and follow. Xiao Xian smiled. Forget it, he would continue to follow. It would be nice to see the legendary Eagle Mountain. He put back the teeth knife in his hand and ran for a while. Then he jumped and caught Cha-Cha's eagle claw flying towards him. The giant eagle in the sky seemed to be very impatient. It circled in the sky and called out a few times, urging them to hurry up. "Let's go," Xiao Xian said. Swoosh, with a carefree cry, Cha-Cha flapped its wings and chased after the giant eagle. This time, Cha-Cha had learned his lesson. He did not get too close to the trees in the forest. He maintained a certain distance, afraid that he would be attacked again. The flying posture of the giant eagle seemed to be more difficult than it was 10 days ago. The heaviness was more obvious, but even so, it was still fast enough for Cha-Cha and Xiao Xian. Cha-Cha could barely keep up. They would fly during the day and find a place to settle down at night. Before they settled down, they would grab some food and bring it to a high cliff to eat quietly. There was no lack of mountains in this area. Sometimes, they would meet other creatures living in the mountains. Most of the time, it was the giant eagle that was fighting, while Xiao Xian and Cha-Cha were cheering it on. They would be a hindrance if they went there. Every time the giant eagle fought with other ferocious beasts, Xiao Xian noticed that the injuries on its body increased. The condition of its claws, beak, and feathers was worse than when he first saw it. Only its pair of eagle eyes were so sharp that he couldn't look directly at it. With such a giant eagle as their escort, the birds along the way did not dare to provoke them, which saved them a lot of trouble. It had been nearly 30 days since they left the third hunting base, but they still had not seen their destination. However, Xiao Xian could see the changes in Cha-Cha and the giant eagle's attitude from their behavior. They were excited, and their eyes were eager. Even the giant eagle, who looked like an elder, could not wait. They were almost at their destination. On this day, the two eagles, one big and one small, continued their journey. Xiao Xian looked at the surrounding scenery. In front of them, there was a long, dragon-like mountain range. This mountain range was very high, which reminded Xiao Xian of the second hunting base. Most of the birds were blocked by the mountain range. Every time they encountered such a mountain range, they would see a different scenery after climbing over it. The peak of the mountain range was covered by clouds, and they could not see the top. They could only see a large area of snow under the clouds. The giant eagle began to climb up, and Cha-Cha followed closely. They wanted to climb over the mountain. Along the way, they had climbed over many mountains, but this time, the challenge was even greater. The higher they went, the more difficult it was. It seemed that there was a force that pushed back any creature that flew up. After flying for a while, Cha-Cha was obviously tired, and it rested on a protruding rock. "Cha-Cha, follow it and fly up. I will stop here." Xiao Xian touched the feathers on Cha-Cha's head and said. "Caw." Cha-Cha dodged Xiao Xian's hand, flapped its wings, and used its claws to grab the rock next to it. "Are you being stubborn again? I will wait here." After thinking for a while, Xiao Xian asked again, "Will you come back?" Cha-Cha answered and continued to grab the rock. "That's good. But it will take too long, so I will go back by myself." Xiao Xian planned to train in this area. There were many species here that Xiao Xian was unfamiliar with. Perhaps he could find some rare and precious herbs that were recorded in ancient scrolls. He always stayed in the tribe, and every time he went out, he would only take the same route. After a long time, he was tired. This time, it was a good opportunity to see this unfamiliar place. He wanted to see the so-called Eagle Mountain, but Cha-Cha was still too small. It was normal for it to travel, but this place was different. It was difficult for it to fly on its own, not to mention carrying a person. The giant eagle above them began to urge them again. Cha-Cha was still a little hesitant, so it called out to the eagle above. "Hurry up and follow it." It was rare for him to ride on such a big leg. If he lost it, where would he find it again? Xiao Xian was talking when he suddenly felt a wind behind his head. He turned his head and saw a giant eagle claw coming at him. Because the claw did not have any killing intent, Xiao Xian did not pull out his teeth knife. Standing on the ground, the eagle was almost 10 meters tall, so its claws were naturally much bigger than Cha-Cha's. It could even catch a big snake, so it was easy for it to catch Xiao Xian. After the giant eagle caught Xiao Xian, it flew up. Cha-Cha looked at it and quickly followed. The giant eagle's claws were obviously used to catching prey, so it could not control its strength. Xiao Xian was caught by the eagle's claws. He felt that his internal organs were about to be squeezed out, and his bones were cracking. If it were not for the strong body of a totem warrior, an ordinary person would have been crushed to death. However, the giant eagle had good intentions. After spending some time together, the giant eagle did not dislike Xiao Xian as much as before. Seeing that Cha-Cha was having a hard time carrying Xiao Xian, it decided to help. However, it did not know that there were many creatures that were much weaker than the prey it usually caught. Without Xiao Xian, Cha-Cha felt a lot more relaxed, but he still couldn't fly fast. The pressure coming from the front seemed to be an invisible big hand, pressing down harder every time he rose a little. Not only Cha-Cha, but also the giant eagle. Xiao Xian's weight was nothing to the giant eagle. It was just resisting the pressure from above. The mountains in front of them were already covered in snow. There was no greenery, but they still could not see the top. Looking up, they could only see layers of clouds. The cold air poured into his lungs. At first, Xiao Xian could still withstand it. It was similar to the winter in the tribe. However, as he continued to climb, Xiao Xian found that even a totem warrior could not withstand the cold. The fur on his animal skin coat was already covered in frost, and the area of ice was expanding. Not only the animal skin coat, Xiao Xian's hair, the giant eagle's and Cha-Cha's feathers were also freezing. There was light above, but the golden Yangguang did not let people feel much warmth at this time. If it was at night, it would probably be even colder. They had to quickly climb over before it got dark. Mobilizing the totem power in his body, a warm current flowed around his body, warming up his almost frozen body. However, once it stopped, he would feel the biting cold again. When Xiao Xian felt that he was about to freeze into a popsicle, he finally saw the top of the mountain. This made Xiao Xian, who was about to turn into a popsicle, and Cha-Cha, who was already exhausted, happy. Cha-Cha flapped its wings more vigorously. Closer. Even closer. Slowly climbing up, over the cloud-shrouded mountain peak, Xiao Xian's pupils shrank as he looked at the scene in front of him. He thought that after reaching the top, he would descend and go to the other side of the mountain. However, when he reached the top, he found that there was only flat ground. Bang! The giant eagle landed on the ice field at the top of the mountain. Xiao Xian, who was thrown away, rolled a few times on the frozen ground before stopping. There was a thick layer of snow on the ground, but the snow was very hard, like stone. Looking behind him, there was a layer of clouds. It was as if he had stepped on the clouds and entered the realm of heaven. However, looking ahead, there were clouds and mist, and he could not see clearly what was in front of him. However, Xiao Xian could feel that there were other living creatures in the lingering clouds and mist. After the giant eagle released Xiao Xian, it panted for a while and then walked forward. Cha-Cha quickly followed. The cold mist filled the air, and Xiao Xian walked beside them. When he turned his head, he could only see a layer of mist. The place where he had landed had disappeared into the mist. On the surrounding ground, there were some protruding crystal-like icicles. One could be seen every few dozen meters. Kacha! Kacha kacha! Xiao Xian looked around. There were similar sounds coming from all directions. Some were near, some were far. However, Xiao Xian did not dare to be distracted. He and Cha-Cha followed closely beside the giant eagle. Tap, tap, footsteps came from behind. It was the eagle's footsteps. A flow of cold air came from behind, and Xiao Xian shuddered. As the footsteps came closer, Xiao Xian turned his head to look. What he saw shocked Xiao Xian so much that he stopped breathing. Because of the mist, Xiao Xian could not see clearly. He could only see a huge black figure in the mist. If Cha-Cha was like a kindergarten kid next to the giant eagle, then the giant eagle was also like a child next to this big guy next to it. Was this also a giant mountain eagle? Xiao Xian used his special vision to look. Although it was still blocked by the mist, he could vaguely make out the skeleton of a giant mountain eagle. He took a deep breath. Xiao Xian suddenly felt that his vision was too narrow. A giant mountain eagle, with the word giant attached to its name, could be seen from its size. The one they had seen before was not a typical example of this species. He just did not know if there were more giant eagles. Among these big guys, Xiao Xian felt waves of pressure. It was as if he had fallen into a nest of monsters. Looking at the two eagles, one big and one small, in front of him, Xiao Xian hurriedly followed. No matter what, following them closely was the best thing to do. The big eagle led Cha-Cha to walk in the misty land. When they came to a protruding crystal-like icicle, the big eagle lowered its head and bit the icicle. It pecked off a piece of the icicle, bit it, swallowed it, and then continued. Cha-Cha looked at it and pecked at the ice as well. Hearing the cracking sounds, Xiao Xian finally understood where the sounds came from. Chapter 142. Xiao Xian thought they would pass through here, but to his surprise, they found a place and stopped. When they were hungry, they gnawed on the icicles next to them, and then continued standing there, as if they were waiting for something. The energy contained in the crystal-like icicles was not as pure as that of the fire crystals, and the energy stored in them was far less than that of the fire crystals. However, these icicles were the food that kept the giant mountain eagles alive. Xiao Xian pried a piece off with his teeth knife and tried to bite it. It was too hard, and barely edible. However, compared to the giant eagles, Xiao Xian could only scrape off a little bit. Although the icicles were cold, and Xiao Xian's hairs shivered when he bit them, the energy he gained from the icicles enabled Xiao Xian to operate his totemic power for a longer period of time. That was why he did not freeze to death. It was no wonder that Cha-Cha was not afraid of the cold at all, even when it was winter in the tribe. Compared to the extreme cold here, the winter in the tribe was too warm for the giant mountain eagles. In the following days, Xiao Xian saw many more giant mountain eagles, except for the giant figure he saw when he first arrived on the frozen plateau. Some were as big as the eagle that brought them here, and some were several times bigger than the one that shocked Xiao Xian on the first day. Was this the mountain the giant mountain eagle mentioned? Was this the Eagle Mountain? Xiao Xian guessed. These giant mountain eagles came here as if they were going to the market, but they were not in a hurry to leave. None of them fought with each other, and they all waited here obediently. Even Cha-Cha, who was usually very energetic, became unusually well-behaved. Every day, he stayed close to the giant mountain eagle that brought them here. Ever since it hatched, it was the first time it came to such a place. Being able to find this place and having a strong sense of longing was completely due to the nature of its bloodline. Days passed, and Xiao Xian did the same thing every day. When he was hungry, he would eat some ice like the giant mountain eagles. Then he would sit quietly beside the two eagles, one big and one small, and operate his totemic power to resist the cold. At first, Xiao Xian's teeth were chattering. The animal skin coat he wore was not thick enough to keep him warm. Xiao Xian's face was pale, and his breathing was slow. At night, he shivered all over and could not sleep. He felt like he was about to become one with the icicles. All he could do was operate his totemic power over and over again. Cha-Cha was not much better than Xiao Xian. It was the first time it's faced in such a harsh environment, and it's not fully adapted or mentally prepared. In contrast, the big eagle beside him and the other giant mountain eagles around him were like old monks in meditation, as if they could not feel the cold. They were already used to it. At first, Cha-Cha wanted to squeeze under the giant eagle's wing to get some warmth, but it was mercilessly pushed aside. It could only stay close to Xiao Xian. They were in the same boat, shivering in the cold fog. Gradually, Xiao Xian began to adapt. Even when he was sleeping, his totemic power would operate on its own, tirelessly warming up his almost frozen body again and again. Cha-Cha was worthy of being a giant mountain eagle. Even if it was not used to it at first, it was getting a lot better these days. Xiao Xian used his teeth knife to carve a mark on an icicle next to him, to record the number of days that had passed. During this process, Xiao Xian found that these icicles could actually grow on their own. The mark that was carved 20 days ago had risen a little after 20 days, and the icicles had also become thicker. The bite and gouge marks made by the two eagles and Xiao Xian were gradually becoming shallower. No wonder those giant eagles could still see so many icicles on the ground. They could grow on their own. What a strange place. Ta. 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 The sound of footsteps came. It sounded like a giant eagle, but its footsteps were slightly heavy. As the footsteps came closer, the effect of the fog became a lot fainter. The tall figure walked past Xiao Xian, which allowed Xiao Xian to see its body clearly. However, he could only see its claws clearly. Above that, the fog still blurred his vision. He could not see the upper part of its body clearly. This should be a very old eagle. Perhaps it used to be an overlord. It had challenged the threats of nature countless times, and had been provoked by its own kind and other beasts. It had once ruled the sky and soared in the sky. But now, it was old. Its sharp claws had become blunt, and there were many fragments on its toes, as if they were about to fall off. Its feathers had become sparse, and there were many wounds on its legs, big and small, of different depths. This situation was very similar to the giant eagle that brought them here. The giant figure walked past them at a close distance. Its claws could easily cover Cha-Cha under its feet. When it walked past, its wings shook, making Xiao Xian feel that the sky above his head was dark for a moment, completely blocking out the light. Cha-Cha and the giant eagle raised their heads to take a look. Then, they withdrew their gazes and continued to be in a daze, perhaps deep in thought. The giant figure gradually walked away until it completely disappeared in the fog. 20 days, 30 days, on the 40th day, the surrounding giant mountain eagles were no longer silent. They began to become active. Sometimes, they would call out a few times, and there would be a series of echoes from other places. These days, more and more mountain eagles came to the ice field. Every day, Xiao Xian could see figures of different sizes passing by. There was a small eagle about the same size as Cha-Cha. It probably came with its parents. It walked next to the two giant figures. When it saw Xiao Xian, it curiously approached him, but was called back by its parents. The fog was thinning. Yang Guang passed through the fog and gradually became clear. On this day, when the sun rose and shone on the high ice field, Xiao Xian found that the fog around him had completely dispersed. Around him, there were many figures of different sizes. The small ones were about the same size as Cha-Cha, and the big ones were as big as mountains. One by one, they completely blocked Xiao Xian's vision. Xiao Xian was among them. He was like an outsider who had intruded into this huge group. He was so small that the giant eagles did not even bother to look at him. Xiao Xian did not know where so many giant beasts had been active. He had lived in the tribe for several years. He had followed the hunting team out to hunt, and even followed the advance group to find Cha-Cha's green land. But he had never seen so many giant eagles. They were not exactly the same. Some had different patterns and colors, but they all looked the same. They belonged to the giant mountain eagle species. Perhaps, they came from all over the continent, or perhaps they had gathered in one place. But no matter where they came from, they were all gathered here at this moment. Jiao, Jiao, the eagle's cry seemed to come from far away. It sounded like there was more than one eagle. It sounded like a group. It resonated with the echoes. The group of eagles cried together. The sound was getting closer and closer. Whoosh! A huge figure flew into the air, flying over the many giant mountain eagles standing on the ice field. It had a sharp beak, sharp claws, powerful wings, and a proud figure. Its entire body exuded a sense of freedom, and it was bold and unrestrained as it soared. This figure covered a large part of the sky above Xiao Xian's head. The originally clear golden Yangguang was completely blocked. This was only the beginning. Behind it, there was 1, 2, 10, 100, a group of giant mountain eagles followed closely. They also flapped their powerful wings. They were light and swift, unruly and heroic. Their flying movements exuded a sense of obvious excitement and pleasure. Compared to the old, weak, sick and disabled standing on the ice field at this moment, they were like strong and healthy experts, full of vitality. It was not only the sky above Xiao Xian's head. In the distance, where Xiao Xian peeked through the gaps between the big figures around him, there were also many figures flying past. They came from the front, then returned to the other side of the mountain. Xiao Xian felt as if he was about to be blown away by the wind created by the eagles. When these figures gradually disappeared, there was already movement in front of him. The sound of wings flapping could be heard. At first, it was sparse, but then a group of wings flapping could be heard. Xiao Xian saw the giant eagles in front of him also flapping their wings and flying up. Beside him, 2 eagle cries could be heard. Xiao Xian looked over. Cha-Cha also flew up. It called out to Xiao Xian, then flew forward with the rest of the group. When these big fellows that blocked Xiao Xian's vision flew up, what appeared in front of Xiao Xian was a snow-covered mountain. The mountain was a little far away, but it was very big. He did not know where the top was. Xiao Xian had thought that this mountain was high enough, but he found that there was another mountain higher than the one before. Under the golden Yangguang, the snow-white mountain in the distance emitted a halo like holy light. It was aloof and independent. Standing on the ice field, Xiao Xian quietly looked at the huge snowy mountain in the distance, feeling the throbbing in his soul. Under such circumstances, he suddenly felt like he was on a pilgrimage. Thousands of eagles flew together towards the snow-white mountain. What was ahead? Xiao Xian also walked in that direction. His footsteps became faster and faster, and his legs that had not moved for a long time gradually became more flexible. In the end, he directly ran. Cha-Cha and the giant eagle's figures quickly merged into the group of eagles. There were too many of them, and it was impossible to tell which was which. Xiao Xian followed the group of eagles forward. Then, he saw the giant eagles fly up one by one and fall down, disappearing from the edge of the ice field. The ice field was at the edge, but in front of it was a bottomless abyss. The group of eagles flew down from the top of the ice field into the abyss. Although they were flying down, they were still heading towards the snowy mountain. The snow-white mountain in the distance, whose bottom could not be seen and whose top could not be seen, stood there proudly. This was the Eagle Mountain. This time, Xiao Xian was very sure. Xiao Xian stood at the edge, watching the group of eagles disappear into the abyss. After an unknown period of time, the fog that had dispersed began to gather again. The gathering fog blocked Xiao Xian's vision. Everything returned to the previous situation. Chapter 143. Xiao Xian was the only one left on the vast ice field. It was very quiet all around. Although the surroundings were usually covered in fog and he couldn't see far, from time to time he could still hear the cries of eagles of different sizes, or the sounds of giant beasts walking back and forth, or the sounds of them gnawing on the icicles. But now, the sounds that he had heard every day in the past had all disappeared. Xiao Xian had a feeling of isolation. However, even without those giant eagles, he still wanted to take a good look at the ice field. After coming here, he didn't dare to wander around because of the giant eagles. Now that the eagles had flown away, he didn't have to worry about them. Even if his vision was limited, he had already memorized the rough terrain within his field of vision while the fog was dispersing. As long as he was careful, there shouldn't be any problems. Xiao Xian walked on the ice field at the top of the mountain. Because of his usual habit, he walked very quietly, and now that the surroundings were very quiet, Xiao Xian subconsciously slowed down his movements. Although he was cautious, his speed wasn't slow. In front of him was the abyss of the cliff where the eagles flew down. Xiao Xian naturally didn't walk forward, but instead walked horizontally along the ice field. In order to avoid accidentally falling into the abyss, Xiao Xian kept a distance from the edge. He already had an idea of the length of the abyss, but he didn't know how far it was horizontally. Even when the fog was dispersing, Xiao Xian still couldn't see the edge. There were some large footprints on the ice field, and the icicles were full of pecking marks. Some of the marks were large, some small. Along the way, Xiao Xian saw a few gigantic icicles. These gigantic icicles would naturally attract the attention of the larger giant eagles. Just look at the marks on the icicles. Most of the pecking marks were on top of the icicles, and it was hard to see further up. Closer to the ground, there were only a few small pecking marks or no pecking marks. The giant eagles wouldn't always lower their heads to bite. Xiao Xian was walking when he suddenly heard a hissing sound. It wasn't loud, but because the surroundings were too quiet, the sound was more obvious. This wasn't the sound of the giant eagles walking. When the giant eagles walked here, most of them had a heavy feeling and were very generous, not avoiding anything. But at this moment, this sound made Xiao Xian feel a sense of caution. The sound was getting closer and closer. Xiao Xian hid behind a huge icicle, carefully paying attention to the creatures in the fog that were getting closer and closer. Gradually, Xiao Xian saw a long figure in the fog. Snake? No, it wasn't a snake. It was not as long as a snake, and the way it moved was different from a snake. It looked more like a worm. Stone worm? Stone worms were commonly seen in mountainous and rocky areas. But soon, Xiao Xian knew that he was wrong. This wasn't a stone worm, but a fleshy worm that was very similar to a butterfly's larva. This worm was thicker than Xiao Xian's thigh. It was nearly 4 meters long and snow-white. It had a round head and a constricted neck between its head and body. It didn't look any different from other butterfly larvae except for its larger size. But if one looked closely, they would find many differences. Many butterfly larvae that Xiao Xian had seen in hunting grounds had 3 pairs of thoracic feet, 4 pairs of abdominal feet, and 1 pair of tail feet. But the one in front of him had 3 pairs of thoracic feet, 3 pairs of abdominal feet, and 3 pairs of tail feet. The thoracic feet and tail feet were very similar, but the abdominal feet were different. The thoracic feet and tail feet had hooks at the front, while the abdominal feet had suction cups. The hissing sound that Xiao Xian heard just now was the sound of it crawling on the ice field. It was a very strange worm. Xiao Xian didn't expect to see such a creature in such a cold place. Generally speaking, they should live in warmer areas. Xiao Xian didn't know if this worm had any attack power. He just stood quietly behind the icicle, observing the snow-white worm that was crawling closer and closer. It crawled for a while, then stopped. Then it used its abdomen and tail feet to prop itself up, as if it was trying to identify something. Then it determined a direction and continued crawling. At this time, it was heading in Xiao Xian's direction. Was he discovered? Xiao Xian was vigilant, his hands silently reaching for the hilt of his sword. But the worm stopped in front of the icicle, and then Xiao Xian heard a small crunching sound. Feeling the vibration from the icicle, Xiao Xian knew that the worm was gnawing on the icicle. Its target was only the icicle, and it didn't notice Xiao Xian. Xiao Xian and the worm, one was on one side of the icicle, the other was on the other side. Xiao Xian didn't stick his head out to observe. He just relied on his hearing and the vibration from the icicle behind him to judge the worm's general behavior. The crunching sound lasted for about 2 hours. The worm changed its location and went to look for other icicles. Xiao Xian quietly followed. Sometimes, without the icicle's cover, as long as Xiao Xian was careful, the worm wouldn't notice Xiao Xian. In its eyes, it didn't seem to care about anything else. It was only focused on looking for food. Xiao Xian found that the worm chose the thick icicles. Because the thick icicles were mostly long, the larger giant eagles gnawed on them. Most of them were gnawed on the top of the icicles, and the ones near the ground were rarely gnawed. And the worm's target was the thick icicles near the ground, where the giant eagles didn't gnaw on them. Was it a neat freak, or was it afraid of the smell left behind by the giant eagles? Xiao Xian didn't know. However, after figuring out its preferences, Xiao Xian became more skillful when following it. Looking at the traces left by the worm on the icicles, Xiao Xian found that the worm ate much faster than he did. Its bite force didn't lose out to the giant eagles. It was just that each bite was very small and it ate quickly, so the crunching sounds were very dense. When the surrounding light became dimmer and dimmer, and it was almost dusk, the worm stopped looking for food and went back to where it came from. Xiao Xian still followed it. The further they went, the thinner the fog became. There was basically no fog in the ice field. At this time, Xiao Xian could see the white worm more clearly. Where did it come from? Where was it going now? When the worm reached the edge, it arched its slender body, then moved along the steep slope, stretching the front part of its body downwards. Then it moved the back part of its body so that the two ends touched. When it moved, it bent and stretched, looking like an arch bridge. Its hooked thorax and tail feet were tightly hooked on the ice and rocks, so that its body wouldn't slide down the steep slope. Xiao Xian looked down. The worm's movements were very fast and stable. For it, such a steep slope was like flat ground. Looking at the sky, Xiao Xian didn't follow it down. Instead, he turned back and leaned against an icicle. After eating some ice, he fell asleep. The next day, Xiao Xian saw the white worm again. It followed the same path as yesterday and crawled back to the ice field, starting the same journey to find food. Xiao Xian continued to follow it. Xiao Xian didn't see any other creatures on the ice field. It was rare to encounter such a strange creature, so Xiao Xian planned to observe it more. Every day, not long after the sun rose, the white worm would climb up the ice field and look for the thick icicles that hadn't been pecked by the giant eagles. It would gnaw on 1/3 of each icicle's cross-section, but it wouldn't break the icicle. After observing the white worm for 5 days, Xiao Xian decided to follow it down the mountain to take a look. Xiao Xian could handle such a steep slope. The situation on the steep slope was much better than on the ice field at the top of the mountain. There wasn't as much fog. Even if there was fog close to the mountain walls, it was very thin. Most of the time, it could directly touch Yangguang. To be safe, Xiao Xian stayed away from the white worm and followed it closely. But soon, Xiao Xian found that the white worm was much faster than him. It was much faster than when they were on the ice field. Before long, Xiao Xian was left far behind. After thinking about it, Xiao Xian returned to the ice field. He changed his strategy. When the white worm climbed up the ice field the next day, Xiao Xian didn't follow it. Instead, he walked down the steep slope. The white worm would leave tracks on the rocks and thick layers of ice. Xiao Xian only needed to follow these tracks to know where it went down the mountain. On the steep slope, there would be deep holes in the ground where the white worm passed. There were also traces of hooks at the bottom of the holes. Looking at the length of the white worm and following its walking pattern, he could quickly find it. In addition, Xiao Xian went down the mountain during the day, so it wasn't hard to find those holes. Xiao Xian kept going down. From the top of the mountain, a strong wind would blow from time to time. Many small ice particles would directly hit Xiao Xian's body. Xiao Xian could only hold on tightly to the rocks or the hard layer of ice covering the rocks. If he was careless, he would directly fall. If he fell from here, he would undoubtedly die. When they flew up the mountain, Cha-Cha and the big eagle took almost half a day. But now, Xiao Xian had used more than half a day, but he hadn't even reached 1/3 of the way up. However, at this point, the white worm's track stopped descending. Instead, it followed the horizontal line and went to other places. Xiao Xian followed the tracks and continued to search. Finally, beside a protruding rock, he saw a nest made of silk. Xiao Xian knew that some meatworms would spit out silk and sew the two sides of leaves together to build a leaf nest. Or they would pull a layer of silk in a sunken area to build a simple nest. When they rested, they would hide in such a nest. When it was time to move, they would come out and look for food. In the few hills around the tribe, this kind of situation was often seen. Sometimes, when one peeled off a rolled-up leaf or a folded leaf, one would find a worm hiding inside. And now, what Xiao Xian saw was the white worm's nest. The silk was very transparent. What was strange was that it didn't reflect light. If Xiao Xian hadn't followed the tracks and was blocked by this layer of silk, he wouldn't have found it. After touching and pulling it, Xiao Xian's first thought was that this kind of silk was perfect for making traps. He just didn't know how long it would last. However, for now, Xiao Xian wouldn't touch these silk threads. He would first observe the white worm. Otherwise, it wouldn't be good to alarm it. Chapter 144. Behind this layer of silk, Xiao Xian didn't find anything special at the angle between the protruding rocks and the mountain wall. There were only some crawl marks. He looked carefully again, but didn't find even a single piece of shit. He thought he would find some treasure, but he didn't expect the white worm's nest to be so clean. Xiao Xian looked down the steep slope again, but didn't find any traces of the white worm. It was obvious that the white worm hadn't come down recently. After finding the white worm's nest and finding nothing else, Xiao Xian decided to go back. After taking 2 steps, Xiao Xian stopped and thought for a moment. Xiao Xian walked behind a protruding rock not far from here. Before he left, he cleaned up his tracks and leaned against the rock to wait. Although Yang Guang was there, the ice pellets that fell from time to time weren't enjoyable. The temperature didn't rise, but when Yang Guang gradually disappeared, the temperature dropped sharply. However, for Xiao Xian, who was used to the temperature at the top of the mountain, this temperature was still bearable and he could sleep. When the sun only left a faint light on the horizon, the white worm returned. Because every step it took was tightly wrapped around the ice and rocks, it naturally made a sound. Xiao Xian was resting with his eyes closed, but when he heard the noise, he quickly looked over. From the angle that Xiao Xian chose, he could clearly see the white worm's movements outside and inside the nest. Although the sun had already set, the 2 moons in the sky provided enough light for Xiao Xian to see the situation over there. After eating its fill and returning to the nest, the white worm excreted. One by one, white translucent balls of ice came out from its tail. After the white worm finished excreting, it kicked the balls of ice down the mountain one by one. Xiao Xian. This worm was really obsessed with cleanliness. It even knew not to dump feces in its nest. After eating and drinking its fill, the white worm laid down in the nest and didn't move. Xiao Xian didn't look again and leaned against the rock to sleep. The next day, before the sun completely rose, the white worm left the nest. After it, Xiao Xian also went up the mountain. In the next few days, Xiao Xian did not go down the mountain, nor did he follow the white worm. Instead, he continued to explore other places on the ice field. After familiarizing himself with the terrain, Xiao Xian also sped up. A few days later, Xiao Xian returned to his original location. He didn't turn back, but because this ice field was circular, he would naturally return to his original location after walking around. During this process, Xiao Xian encountered a few more insects that looked like the white worm, but he didn't spend any more time tracking them. Xiao Xian returned to the starting point, but he didn't see the white worm anywhere. He looked around and didn't see any traces of the white worm. Curious, Xiao Xian went down the mountain and went to the white worm's nest to investigate. He happened to see the worm that had just finished shedding its skin. The shed skin was the same color as the silk it spat out, transparent. Perhaps because it had just finished shedding its skin, it was a little tired. After resting for a while, it moved and kicked the pile of skin out of the nest. Xiao Xian wanted to take the worm's skin to see. The tribe was too short on resources, so if there was something good, they would try to get it. That worm's skin might be a rare treasure, but the white worm didn't care about it and kicked it out of the nest. At first, Xiao Xian was worried that the worm's skin would be blown away by the strong wind, but the next moment, the worm's skin that was kicked off fell straight down and hit the ice below with a bang. Looking at the hole made by the worm's skin, Xiao Xian was stunned. Even the worm's skin was so heavy, so the white worm itself must be heavier. He really couldn't tell. Xiao Xian couldn't directly go over and get the worm's skin now. The white worm was still resting in the nest and had to wait for an opportunity. And this opportunity had been waiting for an entire night. When the sun rose again, the white worm that had shed its skin for a night climbed up the mountain like a ghost. Xiao Xian went over and picked up the worm's skin that had been smashed into the snow. After a night, the worm's skin was covered with ice and snow. Brushing away the snow, Xiao Xian picked up the worm's skin. The heaviness in his hand was completely different from the appearance of this worm's skin. However, for people who often moved stones in the tribe, this weight was still bearable. Xiao Xian held the transparent worm's skin in his hand and could clearly see the lines on his palm. He pulled hard and didn't tear it. It was indeed a good thing. Xiao Xian rolled up the worm's skin and tied it with a leather rope from the animal skin bag. Looking around the nest, Xiao Xian didn't find any other worm skin, so he cleaned up the surroundings and went up the mountain. After that, Xiao Xian went to look for other white worms. Following their footsteps, he found the nest and picked up 2 more worm skins. He didn't see the rest. Maybe they hadn't shed their skin yet, or maybe they kicked it too far away and the worm skins weren't around. They could even be wrapped in snow and rolled down the mountain. Xiao Xian saw traces of snow sliding down the mountain in several places. Xiao Xian couldn't do anything about it. While Xiao Xian was looking for worm hives and collecting worm skins, Xiao Xian noticed that the white worms' bodies were becoming transparent. They were originally snow-white, but gradually, they became translucent, and their transparency increased day by day. Finally, one day, the white worms all disappeared. Xiao Xian saw the worms that had turned into cocoons in the nest. There were no cocoons, but the layer of silk around them was thicker. The cocoons were also transparent and had edges. At first glance, they looked like transparent ice. If you didn't look carefully, you wouldn't be able to see that there was a cocoon there. He didn't know how long this cocoon would last. Xiao Xian would go down the mountain to have a look every few days. He knew a few stone worm nests, and the detailed locations were recorded in his mind, so it wasn't hard to find them. At other times, Xiao Xian would slowly absorb the energy from the ice on the ice pillars. He found that in this place, when he calmed down, his heart was very peaceful. It was very suitable for absorption. The energy on the ice wasn't ordinary energy. It was different from the energy contained in the fire crystal, and it wasn't pure either. However, the energy of the fire crystal could only play a supporting role for Xiao Xian. The totem in his sea of consciousness didn't change at all. This was the difference between Xiao Xian and the others in the tribe. Every time the ice on the pillar absorbed the energy, there would be a very small amount of energy gathered in the totem. This was the fundamental reason why Xiao Xian was able to operate the totem's power. The 2 moons in the night sky gradually became full, and the night became brighter as they got closer. On this day, the 2 moons overlapped. Xiao Xian walked out of the clouds on the top of the mountain, and looked at the moon in the night sky. When he was in the tribe, he could hear the roars of the beasts in the forest far away. But here, it was very quiet. He couldn't hear any birds or beasts, as if he was isolated from the world. From the first hunt of the year to now, the 2 moons overlapped. In the blink of an eye, nearly half a year had passed. Suddenly, Xiao Xian felt that something seemed to be happening at the bottom of the steep slope. Thinking of the white worms that had turned into pupae, Xiao Xian decided to go down the mountain to have a look. This night, under the overlapping moons, everything was as bright as day. This night was unusual for the beasts and ferocious beasts. Therefore, Xiao Xian was extra careful when he went down the mountain. When he finally came near the white worm nest, Xiao Xian saw a much smaller worm coming out of the nest. It looked like a butterfly without wings, with two club-shaped antennae. When it climbed out and climbed up the protruding rock, white light like electricity was emitted from its body, forming the shape of a wing, and stretched out. The wing grew bigger and bigger, until it almost covered the protruding rock. The white fluorescent wings slowly flapped twice, and then rested for a while. Then, the worm jumped down from the rock, flapped its wings, and flew away. Looking at the distance, there were also some white light spots, which were the white worms in other parts of the mountain. Those white worms that had turned into pupae all turned into butterflies at the same time. There was no starlight in the night sky, and these white butterflies were like the stars in the night. There was still a cold wind with ice and snow, but it didn't seem to have any effect on them, and they continued to fly steadily, further and further away. Xiao Xian stood there, watching the light spots become smaller and smaller until they disappeared. Then, he retracted his gaze and looked at the white worm nest. The silk was still there. If it continued to stay there, and no one touched it for a long time, the silk net would be blocked by the wind and snow. When the white worms turned into pupae, there would be a thick layer of ice and snow on the silk. Xiao Xian went over and pulled the silk. These silk were not easy to cut. During this time, Xiao Xian had studied the worm's skin, and he found that the wrinkled worm's skin was not easy to flatten, but it was much easier if he instilled totemic power into it. Xiao Xian used the same method to get the silk. Originally, the silk was tightly attached to the rock, almost as if it was one with the rock. After Xiao Xian instilled totemic power into it, he pulled it off with a little force. Unlike the heavy skin that the white worms shed, these silk were very light, which made Xiao Xian even more happy. There was nothing left in the stone worm's nest, not even a broken pupa. He didn't know if it had been kicked down the mountain early, or if it had decomposed on its own, or if it had been eaten by the white worms. It didn't matter if he couldn't find it, for Xiao Xian, getting these silk was already the biggest gain of the night. He went to a few places, raided the white worms' nests, and got quite a lot of silk. Of course, the white worms didn't care about these silk. If they did, they wouldn't have left it here. In some of the nests, the silk nets had been cut and bitten, and then the white worms had let them flutter in the wind. Xiao Xian's operation of collecting the silk lasted for 2 days, and at this time, new giant eagles arrived. Just like when Cha-Cha and the other eagles came, these giant eagles were very tired, and looked like they were in poor health, like old men in their twilight years. The continuous arrival of these giant eagles made Xiao Xian know that perhaps Cha-Cha and the rest would be back soon. Because the giant eagles had gathered on the ice field again, Xiao Xian didn't run around anymore. He waited at the place where he and Cha-Cha and the rest stood, trying to reduce his presence as much as possible. Xiao Xian chewed on some ice, while paying attention to the giant eagles that passed by. While chewing, Xiao Xian felt that something was wrong. He looked up and saw a giant eagle fall, and with a bang, it fell in front of Xiao Xian. The eagle's head was not far from Xiao Xian, so he could see it very clearly. For a moment, big eyes met small eyes. You're tuning into the Biyao's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.